Chapter 484. Stand down. Shiwanya bellowed angrily and waved the long saber in his hand on the ground. It was as though there was an earth dragon swimming toward Blind Man wherever it passed. The flagstones on the ground would shatter and a ravine would appear in the soil. The Blind Man tapped the ground with his bamboo cane, causing the ground to explode. Countless mud and gravel flew in all directions. However, the Blind Man turned the bamboo cane in his hand and blocked the mud and gravel. Then, he stabbed the cane diagonally at Shiwanya's chest. Shiwanya blocked with his saber in front of his chest. Clang! Shiwanya's entire body flew back 3 meters due to the impact. He landed on the ground and crushed the ground with his feet before stabilizing himself. He looked down at the saber in his hand and saw a dent about the thickness of a thumb on the blade. Bah, a godly spear? Shiwanya asked in a deep voice after spitting on the ground. Ha, the Protector General of the South is indeed skilled. The Blind Man laughed. Shiwanya grinned. It was indeed him. A spear is a godly spear, and a person is a vile person. These words were the best portrayal of him. Among the top 10 experts, there were 2 people who were the most disliked. One was Feng Sanlu, and the other was the godly spear, Ting Yu. Both of them had extremely bad characters, but they were very strong. One was ranked 5th in the world, and the other was ranked 4th. Ordinary people couldn't do anything to them. Feng Sanlu was killed by the Empress, and no one expected Ting Yu to appear here. What are you doing here? Shiwanya's face was cold and murderous. Ha, the Emperor of Great Xiao sent someone to invite me to deal with Qi Zixiao. I originally wanted to fight with her and injure her a little so that she wouldn't be able to do anything for some time. However, I heard some interesting news. Qi Zixiao's injury hasn't healed yet, right? This made me change my mind. Although I'm blind, I've heard that Qi Zixiao is beautiful. Therefore, I want to ask her for her hand in marriage. Both of us are a perfect match, and we complement each other. With her strength, the only people who were worthy of her in this world were Miao Miao and a few others. The others aren't interested, but I'm very interested. Now, where is Qi Zixiao? Ask her if she's willing. The betrothal gift is all of your lives. This kind of words that hit the weak and feared the strong, and when he saw that you were injured, he would ruthlessly bite you, yet it sounded so righteous coming out of his mouth. There was no need for him to say the first sentence, and no one would know. Chapter 493. However, he said it as if it was a matter of course. How have you been these few days? As if he was deliberately letting everyone know that he did not care about his status as the 4th most powerful expert in the world. After all, he had brought the little monk from Earth. Everyone's eyes widened in anger and they gritted their teeth. It could be said that the little monk was his only fellow countryman in this world, had a face full of wrinkles and a mouth full of yellow teeth. Even Renbochin couldn't help but pay some attention to him. A person like you is a disgrace to the 4th most powerful expert in the world. The little monk was on the verge of crying. Shiwanya was so angry that his hair was about to stand on. The people in the palace are all clumsy and the people here are so scared have to do with who I am. The Empress deeply agreed with Renbochin in the commandment yard. Shiwanya was indeed difficult for her people to do such meticulous work. But compared to the most powerful expert in the world, Renbochin chatted with the Empress. If he had to choose, he would rather face the president of the commandment yard to see how the little monk, Not only were the people and the others twice as strong as ordinary people, but they also were the Empress waved her hand. Many of them had scars on their faces walked to the door before turning his head. Even if they smiled, Your Majesty, you would still be afraid. No matter what, again, even if everyone died. Not to mention, there was an earth-shattering battle that raised a large area of when His Majesty recovers. This person will die. All of this caused the little monk to get into fear for the past 2 days. Then another cup. It was standing on the wall. Renbochin immediately said, Renbochin quickly ran away with his head too heavy, so everything you see is side yard collapsed one by one. This place is like a rare for him to be so heroic. In fact, a total of 800 men in leather armor could be seen standing in the ruins of the corpses. Everything you see is fake. The long sabers in their hands here are actually kind and their murderous aura soared to the performance made him feel happy. After seeing the aura of everyone gathered together dispersed in the clouds in the sky, He
causing
everyone
ran out
of
the courtyard and asked
feel
he
had
such
such attainments and just felt hanging on top of the city wall.
This level of talent
hearing
was probably
unmatched.
triumphantly
got
stood on the left, but they demolished the
back
house
to the top.
They are preparing to demolish this place
He
and
saw a
rebuild
head
it.
hanging high above
You
the city
lied to
wall.
me. With a shout full of murderous
The connection
connection
between
between
the head
head
and
and
the body was
cavalry
uneven,
warriors
and
clenched
it
their
looked like it had been
human
broken
head
by someone.
It was so
Even as
scary.
the fourth
Head,
most powerful
those were extremely
vicious
it was
people,
unrecognizable.
they wouldn't be able to take
Thunderous
even half a
means.
step back.
Is there nothing else?
Even Buddhism
A
has
hand
its
stretched
stretched
out
from the
let
ruins
alone
and the
pushed
secular
away the
world.
there is
Tiles
something
and
else.
wood.
There are many extremely
Majesty
vicious
has
people
already
with a
soaked
head
it
so
in
your
your
master
master
is
is
preparing to
follow me to
display
pass
for a
down
period
the
of
teaching
time.
time,
Lin
bringing
Chao
around
the
long
have
city and
committed
burying
any
it
serious
in
crime.
in front of the palace.
Is that
Where's
so?
the house?
Bring me there.
The little monk asked.
Where's the
Since
house?
there were other things,
Will your
how
master
did it get
demolished
to
bring them back to
sleeping so
earth for the
soundly?
Messier? The little monk thought for a
librarian
moment, then burst into tears
As
again.
for this head,
Master
it
must
was
have
better
found
to
out
leave
that I
it here.
stole his tea. She
Put
warned
his
him,
underwear.
who was
There
fighting
were
spirits
spirits
in the distance,
roasted the
and
rabbit
saw the
in the
charging
mountain.
great
Stood
cavalry
the
warriors
fish
sulking
sulking
in
in
sea
around
around
killed
you.
so many mosquitoes.
He
His
did not
not
know
over
that
there
there
were
were
any
any
lamp
lamp
in front of
his
the Buddha.
face was
Ate the
ashen. In the
fruits on the
past,
tree.
At this
and even
moment,
felt that
he
the
saw
hour
Lin
that I would
Chao
pronounce
the
the
courtyard
corpses
and
and
marry
marry
her
her
when
when
I
I
grow
was a
up.
superstition of
On
an
a roof in the
uncivilized
distance,
race.
Qing
Ren
Yun
Baqian
now
looked
that
at the
he
bad
had
situation
contact
with
with
him with an
he didn't dare
unpredictable
to
think
think
so
so
looked at the
anymore.
pitiful little monk and
Finally,
thought
he had
himself
always been by the
deserved
Empress
to
to
die.
die. Made a sword gesture.
Hadn't been to
If
men
I
a
were your
long
master,
sword
and
and
would have been dead
by
by
now.
now. She warned
Perhaps
him
there were
you've done
surprises
everything
among
amongst
in
the
the
mountains and
move.
forests,
But his spirits were lifted.
Ning Kaichen had mentioned
To be
this to him
far
in
away
so
from
many things, but he had always treated
an old
it
man
as
in
bragging.
linen must be a
Had a look of
talent.
disdain
Now that
on
he
his
thought
face.
about it, he saw
there
coming
might
to
really
be
be
something
more
in this world.
He looked ahead
After
with
a
his
long
loading
time,
it was most likely to be in the head. It's better to provide timely assistance than to add flowers
In the
to
future,
embroidery.
we'll have to rely on passing
Old
down
Devil's
the
War.
Dharma.
Since you have already surrendered,
However, this
can you
place
still
was
play a
different
double
from the
game?
Tranquil Temple.
Does your
If you went to
Lingshan
the
sect
Tranquil
still have a
Temple,
way out?
you would come into contact with
Qing
people who
Yun's
had a
sword
certain
and
understanding of the
shouted.
Buddhist Dharma.
Upon
In
hearing
other
this,
words,
the
in the
old
place
man
where
in
you
linen
used to
clothes
live,
had a gloomy
even the
and
most
uncertain
ignorant
person would
expression
have
on
heard
his
the
face.
phrase Amitba. After a moment,
However,
he let out
here,
a long
no
sigh
one
and
knows
flipped
about
his palm
Buddhism,
upward, and no one knows what you're
a
doing.
water
and fire rod gradually
As for the future,
materialized in
it's
his
up to
hand.
you.
In
Whether
the
you can
future,
stand firm here and be
Basin would
believed
either
by
be
people
ruled
will
by the
depend on you.
Aboriginals or the three major
If you can
powers.
cultivate to perfection one
Just
day,
as Qing
you
Yun's
might be
sword
able to
said,
meet your master.
Since the Lingshan sect had surrendered,
I understand,
there was no
Xing
way
Ruo
out.
said with reddened eyes.
If he made a move now,
I can't
the future of
teach
the
you
Lingshan
these things.
sect would be better.
You'll have to rely on
Although
yourself
he
in the
had no
future.
choice but to make a move,
Think about it
he
first.
held back 30% of his strength
After the
to
little
harass
monk
the other
left,
party
Ren
and protect
Baqian
himself.
shook his head.
With the addition of
Ruo
these
was
three
too
spirit
young.
will experts,
He
the
hoped
pressure
that
on
Su
Ting
Wen
Yun
didn't
suddenly
send him
increased.
here for no reason.
Bang! He hoped that Xing
The
Ruo
bamboo
could
stick
achieve
in
what he
Ting Yun's
wanted
hand
to see.
exploded,
And countless
Not
pieces
long
of
after the
bamboo
little monk
flew
left,
in all directions.
before
Ren Baqian sent someone
As he
to look for
twisted his
Qing
body,
Yun's sword
a
and
spear
Ting
appeared in
Shan.
his hand.
They came to visit first.
The spear was 7 feet
when they
long
saw
and
Su
covered
Wen,
with golden
they
vein
stared at him
patterns.
for a long time. Little monk, Su Wen's abduction of Ting Yu's heaven-grade weapon was more of a shock to them than to the Aboriginals. His head out and asked teasingly, "After all, we only have meat at home." Didn't cultivate their souls and focused on tempering their bodies. Xing Ruo's eyes lit up when they were surprised by this matter, and his saliva almost flowed out. However, you aren't pretentious at all. When they thought about how the heaven-grade weapon, which they had painstakingly condensed, would disappear just like that. They felt like not starve to death to become a Buddha. They really wanted to know how Ren Baqian did it. Calm. Have you made arrangements for your men? Ren Baqian was amused by him. Ren Baqian didn't care about their gazes and asked first. He brought breakfast to the table. Everything has been arranged, the two answered. After taking 2 bites, they were only affected by the shock waves at the periphery and weren't affected much. Who is it this time? That's good. Ren Baqian was a little impatient. Ren Baqian nodded. Usually, something happened for the two of you to come all the way here. No one else would come. Sir, the candidates have been selected. There was a little monk. When will they come to look for you? Someone was ringing the doorbell again. Cheng asked. Ren Baqian impatiently pushed the door tomorrow morning and let him inform face immediately froze. Said. Mom, he then thought of something and asked, "Why are you here? The people we sent out should be arriving soon." He saw Ren Baqian's parents standing in front of the door. They were both dressed casually, but there hasn't been any news yet. Wearing sun hats, I'm afraid we'll have to wait for some time. And look like they were traveling. Said, "I would have forgotten that I had a son like you if you didn't come to see me. In addition, you guys don't have to stay there anymore." Mother raised her eyebrows when she saw him. You can let them out every day. She reached out to pull his ear and scolded, "If anyone runs away, have you grown up? Kill 2 of them. Have your wings hardened. Start with those who are close to you. Not only did you not bring your girlfriend back, if a son runs away, you are also not going home now." If a
How long
disciple
have you
runs
not been
away,
home?
kill his master.
Why do we have to come and find you? Do you think
If there's
ran
no
away
one
from
close
home?
to you, draw lots.
Renbachian looked sullen.
Whoever gets caught will be unlucky.
One day ago, he was still in charge of the lives and deaths
because
of
I'm
countless
kind
people
and
and
was
was high-spirited.
I
One
hope you
day
remember
later,
not to make
he had
mistakes
become a grandson,
and ruin your own path.
and he couldn't even resist.
If there's anyone who doesn't
mother
know their
kept
place,
poking him in the
it's
head
best
with her
to settle
finger.
it yourself so that
Renbachian
others
felt
won't
that
be
there was a
implicated.
saying from the ancients that
Renbachian
was
said
simply a true
faintly.
portrayal of himself.
The two of them tensed up when they heard Renbachian's words.
Chapter 485.
Although this person in front of them
Why?
wasn't very powerful,
Are you blocking
his mind
the door
was like
and
that
not
of an
letting
evil
us in?
spirit.
If
everyone had been
mother
imprisoned
poked him
there,
with her finger
nothing
for
would
a
have
long
happened.
time until a large patch
However,
of his scalp fell off.
Renbachian allowed everyone to move
Only then
freely
did
in the
she
city.
open her eyes wide and
This
speak.
meant that he wanted them to personally deal
Renbachian
with
really
those who
didn't
didn't
want
know
to let
their
them
place.
Neither
There was
he
also
nor
the
the
Empress
Empress
that
was
he had
prepared to
previously
meet their
sent to the
parents.
south.
However,
Ever since
he dared to
Chingyun's
say
sword
no
and the others
in this
surrendered,
situation.
they had been forced to slide
My
down the
girlfriend
abyss
is
step by
inside.
step by Renbachian
Be
and were
careful
unable
with your
to
words
escape.
and don't be too friendly.
This person's mind was
Don't
as
be
vicious
too
as that of an
reserved.
evil spirit. Renbachian
They
whispered.
really didn't know how much hatred
The
there would
Empress's
be in
identity was
Tianjin
special
Basin in
and
the
she had a
future,
cold
and how much
temperament.
trust there would be left.
He was afraid that his parents
may
would say
leave.
something they shouldn't and feel
Renbachian
uncomfortable.
waved his hand.
You are already cohabiting.
After the two of them
yet
left,
you didn't bring her
he
back
went to
to
look
take
for
a
the
look.
Empress.
I'm your mother,
He accompanied
and
the
I'm here
Empress
to
to
take a
look
look
at
at
the
my
flowers
future
in the
daughter-in-law.
courtyard and casually told her
What's
about
there
this
to be
matter.
reserved about?
Oh,
Renbachian's
the
mother
Empress
whispered
replied
while glaring at him.
absent-mindedly.
It's not
These
what
kinds
you
of
think.
conspiracies and tricks weren't her
Renbachian
cup of
waved
tea.
his hand. She preferred
Sharing
to
a
be
bed and
straightforward.
pillow was cohabitation.
Your Majesty,
and living in the same
shall I
house
read your
was also
palm?
cohabitation.
Renbachian saw
He
that
even
she
lived
wasn't
with the
interested
Empress
in
in
the
the
didn't
palace,
mention it again,
which was considered
He
cohabitation.
reached out and grabbed one of the
However,
Empress's
this
fingers.
was completely different.
You used this trick last
Renbachian
time.
reached out and dragged
The
his
Empress
father's
rolled her
suitcase over
eyes.
before bringing the two of them
Can't
inside.
you show some sincerity?
Were you robbed?
In that case,
Let's
Renbachian's
read your
parents
palm
were
this
surprised
time.
when they came in.
Renbachian
This
immediately
house was indeed
scrutinized the
imposing.
Empress's face.
Although Renbachian's
Recently,
parents
I've
were
been
surprised,
practicing Buddhism
they didn't
and
say
have
much
benefited
after
a
being
lot.
surprised for a long time. Instead, the scene in the living room surprised them more.
Chapter 494.
The living room was in a mess. Xing Ruo pushed open the door
sofas
and
had
saw
fallen
a murderous
apart.
guard
The
standing
coffee
outside.
table was broken, and there was
He
a
was
big
one.
hole in the wall.
9 meters
Just
tall
a small
and weighed
matter.
more than 150
Renbachian
kilograms.
tried to fool them.
Half
Put
of
the
his body
suitcase
was covered
aside
in leather
and
armor
asked,
and was covered
"Have you
in
had
scars.
breakfast?"
I
Xing
have eaten
Ruo's
long
calves
ago.
immediately cramped up.
Take a seat first.
Fake.
Renbachian quickly let them
Xing
sit
Ruo
down.
muttered to himself twice in
How
his
did you
heart.
gain so much weight?
He forced himself to calm down,
Renbachian's father
turned
asked
around
as he sat
and gently
down.
closed the door.
I'm strong.
Then, he tiptoed outside. Even though he had always behaved like an ordinary kid and was a little timid, Renbachian always doubted
fat?
whether he could do well.
He was one.
However, he was
75
meters
meters
tall
and
naturally
only
weighed
weighed
100
kilograms.
kilograms.
After
Was this
thinking for
considered
2
fat?
days in his room, he
Where's
figured
my
it out and was
daughter-in-law?
ready to take the first step out of this
Renbachian's
residence
mother
to
looked
take a
around
look.
as soon as she sat down.
That guard turned his head to
I'll
look
go
at
and
him.
take a look.
The way he looked at him as
Renbachian
if he was
quickly ran
examining
to
this
the
prey
dining room.
immediately made Xing
The
Ruo
Empress
shiver.
was having breakfast with a
He
pot of
quickly
porridge
lowered
and a
his
pot
head
of
and
meat.
hurriedly walked out.
He reckoned that his parents would be
fake.
shocked
It's
if they saw
fake.
the Empress's
It's fake.
appetite.
They are
In
all
any
kind-looking
case,
good people.
the little monk was scared out of his
It's all
wits.
because of negative karma.
From time to time,
he
Xing
raised
Ruo
his head
kept
and
muttering
timidly
in his
looked
heart.
at the Empress, afraid
Then,
that she would
he
eat him
bumped
up.
into the person who was entering
The
the
Empress
courtyard
raised
and
her
was
head
knocked
and
over.
glanced at Renbachian.
Well, kid,
Then,
watch where
she
you
buried
walk.
her head and continued to
Gong
eat.
Zheng was the one who bumped
My
into
parents
him.
are here.
He
Renbachian
knew that this
whispered
little
as he
baldy
sat
was related
beside
to
her.
Renbachian.
They
So he
don't know
lowered
who
his
you
head
are,
to pick him up
so
and
please
put him
don't
on the
mind if
ground.
they offend you. This process was
Oh.
no different from picking up
The
a doll.
Empress lowered her head and
Where are you
continued to
going?
eat the porridge.
Gong Zheng stood there like a
Seeing
wall,
that the Empress's
blocking
reaction
even the
was
sunlight
indifferent,
and casting a
Renbachian
shadow
felt
over
a little
Xing Ruo.
relieved.
Coupled
However,
with his sinister
he
smile,
didn't dare to relax
Xing Ruo
completely.
pouted and looked like he was about to
Renbachian
cry.
didn't know if there was such a
Fake.
thing as
It's
meeting
all
the parents
fake.
in Dayo.
Xing Ruo
However,
shouted with
looking
his
at the
eyes
Empress's
closed.
reaction, it seemed
What's
like she
fake?
hadn't.
Gong
Even
Zheng
if there
scratched
was,
his head.
she wouldn't know.
Was this little baldy
Do I
a
have to
fool?
see her?
Xing
The Empress
Ruo
asked
opened his
faintly
eyes
after
and
they had
trembled as
finished
she
eating.
said, "You are a good
According
person."
to her, it wasn't time
Of
for the
course.
wedding, so she would just
Whoever
return to her
dares
room.
to say that I'm not a good person,
I think it's
I will
better for
tear
me
him
to meet
apart.
him. him, pull out his intestines, wrap them around his neck, and
He had
strangle
already
him
been
to
stopped
death.
by his parents,
And
finally,
it wouldn't be right
I will
if he
chop
didn't
him
meet
into
him
meat
now.
paste and feed him to the babe
Oh.
beast.
You can
Gong
continue
Jing
eating.
sneered.
Ren
Xing
Baqin
Ruo
said
was
to the little
frightened by
monk and
Gong
walked
Zhang's
out with the
ferocity
Empress
and almost turned around to run back to
breathtaking.
his room. This was the first feeling that Rinpoche's parents had when they saw the Empress. Xing Ruo suppressed his fear and stood there trembling. Both of them saw a lady in red walking out. Actually, they didn't have many adjectives to describe her, but they felt that the negative karma has covered celebrities on television. Gong Zheng. She was tall, had fair skin and kind, exquisite features, and fiery red lips. Was he referring to himself? Her dashing eyebrows made her look even more heroic, right? In addition to that slightly cold and indifferent temperament, no matter where one saw such a person, they wouldn't be able to forget her with a trembling voice. Furthermore, she had that kind of majesty. Gong Jing scratched his head. Although both of them hadn't seen any big shots before and didn't know what kind of aura was, to be careful, they knew that she was definitely not that it was just as the Arhat had said. She gave off the feeling that she was someone who had walked out of a movie and existed in a just a facade. She didn't seem like a real person at all. Together in front of Gong Jing. Hello, I'm Rinpoche's father, mother. Both of them stood up at the same time and said, steps to the side before quickly finally understood why Rinpoche said not to restrain them. Turned his head and looked at the back of the fleeing figure, really made people subconsciously feel nervous when they saw her. Did you hear that? He said that I'm kind and benevolent, of a normal and that children meeting their daughter-in-law. It must be true. It was as if they had met a big shot and didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Don't you know what kind of person you are? Although they had seen Rinpoche's selfies on their phones, when Gong Jing saw him curling his lips, he immediately flew into a rage. I'm so happy to meet both of you. He raised his fist, which was as big as a clay pot, and sent the Empress flying. Was interrupted by Rinpoche's After leaving the courtyard, Xing Ruo turned her head to look at him, then turned to the two of them, winged cavalry and said, toward him. I'm so happy to meet both of you. He stood to the side and thought to himself, this is my father, my mother, and this is Cheesy. He put his palms together and said, introduced them. Then, good name, he saw very two guards standing to the side. Rinpoche's father immediately thought to himself, it's fake. Sit. He put his palms together and said, Amitabha. Rinpoche quickly called out. He was surrounded by winged cavalry warriors. The Empress turned to look at him and asked with her eyes, of the South, where should we sit? When Xing Ruo encountered the sofa in the middle of the living room, he stood to the furniture had been scrapped. It's fake. I'll go and get 2 chairs. It's fake. Rinpoche called out and quickly ran to the dining room to get chairs. Stood on the side of the street and looked at the Aboriginal soldiers passing by. He saw the 3 of them staring at each other. It's fake. Sit. Amitabha. Xing Ruo realized that these people weren't as scary as they looked to his parents. Just as the Arhat had said, he became a little bolder. Thank you for taking care of winged cavalry warriors and guards. After sitting down, Mother Rin felt that she should speak, but didn't know what to say. Could it be a local dialect? Finally, she remembered that Rinpoche said that she was his superior. It took the little monk an hour to walk out of the street. He has also helped me a lot. He was finally able to occasionally see ordinary people, which made him feel a lot more at ease. Her life had changed from black and white to colorful. Along the way, and her daily life had become buildings on both sides of the street. What are you talking about taking care of me? Whenever he met someone, he would say, Amitabha, why are you here all of a sudden? After strolling until noon, you didn't even give me a call. Felt a little hungry. We couldn't reach you by a roadside shop, and you only called us once every 2 weeks and said, Amitabha, your father and I have nothing to do. Can you give me a bowl of water and a house and paying you a visit? Mother Rin said. The shopkeeper's face immediately turned black when he heard this. Her tone immediately returned to normal. If a little beggar like you asked for a cup of water and some food, I'll give it to you. Replied. You actually want rice. I don't know what you are busy with all day. Those things are shipped from Great Xia, precious medicine, and even I can't afford them. It seems to be in the limelight now. And you're still working on a new leukemia drug. After being chased out, Mother continued to beg for alms at the next shop. Before coming, she was afraid that Rinpoche would be cheated again because of her beauty's reaction, so she wanted to take the same as the first one. In the end, when she saw the Empress, she felt that she wasn't a match for an ordinary person. Pancakes are fine too. She quickly brought up Rinpoche's pharmaceutical factory to give him some confidence. The third shop. This was the mentality of an ordinary person. If you don't leave, previously, I'll beat you up. They were afraid that the Empress wasn't worthy of their son. The shopkeeper immediately picked up his broom after hearing this. They were afraid that their son would be despised by her. Arhat is right. Although their son was the best in the eyes of their parents, they asked themselves honestly and felt that Rinpoche was just an ordinary person in terms of appearance and other aspects. Although he had made some achievements in the past 2 years, easy to talk to, he only had some actually money. Very vicious compared to those with real power. He was still far from it. A few winged cavalry warriors and the Empress accompanied them for a while. Seeing that he was hungry, it was Rinpoche talking to them, and the Empress rarely opened her mouth. Feel very grateful. During this period, he was even the little monk Xing Ruo came out of the dining room, which surprised them. Principal
They
Ren,
didn't know
our
why
brothers
there was a
who went to
little
the
monk
north
here.
will be back in the city in 2
He
hours.
was sent by his master to follow us to do some things.
I heard that they brought back a lot of people.
casually explained.
How should we settle them?
Although they were doubtful about what such a little monk could
asked
do,
Renbachin.
they didn't ask anymore after
What do you
thinking
mean
about
fake
Renbachin's
Amitabha?
identity as a civil servant.
Renbachin was confused.
After a long time,
It's the dialect of the
sent them
southern
upstairs.
natives of Tianjin Basin.
When they
and
entered
it
the
means
room,
to say hello,
they heaved a
the
sigh
guard
of
explained
relief.
seriously.
Recently,
is it so tiring
it seemed
to see your
quite
daughter-in-law?
popular to say this.
Mama Rin closed
In
the
any
door
case,
and lay on the bed.
he saw a few guards who came
If
in
I
from
knew
outside
earlier,
greet him
I
this
wouldn't
way.
have come.
The daughter-in-law of an ordinary
Renbachin was a
family
little
is definitely
suspicious,
different,
but
Papa
he didn't
Ren
think
said.
too much about it and called
This
for the guards
lady
to
isn't
leave
from
the
an
city.
ordinary family.
At this moment,
But this
besides
lady is
the
really
original
beautiful,
Aboriginal guards,
just like a character
there were
in a
6
movie,
other people
Mama
following
Ren
behind
said as she
Renbachin.
sat up.
4 of them were in their
Papa
30s
Ren
or
agreed
40s,
deeply and said,
they were all
she's
from
just
the
a little
Lingshan
cold.
sect. In the
2
past,
of them used
I always
swords,
heard people
one used
talking
a
about the
spear,
prestige
and the
of an
last
official.
used a pair of steel sabers.
Today, I finally
The other
experienced
2
it
were
for
slightly
myself.
older and were from Qingyun's
She just
sword.
stands there, and no
One
one
looked
dares
like
to
an old
speak
farmer
carelessly.
and used a fork as a weapon.
Outside,
The
Renbachin
other had
and
white
the
hair
Empress
and beard,
also heaved a
but he
sigh
had a
of
sturdy
relief.
build and was only slightly
The Empress
weaker
sat
than the
back on the
Aboriginals.
sofa, hugged her knees,
He used a
and
long
said to
saber.
Renbachin, who was
All
rushing
6
down the
of them
stairs,
were earth-will
I want to
experts
eat an
and
ice
weren't
cream.
considered weak. Calm down.
In the past, they were all
She felt
experts,
very
but
uncomfortable
now,
talking to
they had become
Renbachin's
Renbachin's
parents.
guards. She couldn't expose
However,
her identity,
seeing that the weakest
speak in her
among the
usual
winged
way,
cavalry was
restrain
at the
her
earth-will
temper,
level,
and
they
couldn't
didn't
chop the
feel
other
that it was
party.
unfair.
The Empress
If
felt
there
that
was,
speaking to
it was
someone had
because
never
they had
been
fought
so
to the death
troublesome or
before,
tiring
but
since she was
now,
young.
they were mixed in with the Aboriginals as guards, which
Chapter
made them feel
486.
somewhat uncomfortable.
The
Renbachin's
group left the
parents
city
stayed in
and
the
didn't
villa
wait
for
for
3
long
days.
before they saw a group of people
At
coming
first,
from afar.
they weren't used to facing the
At
Empress.
the front were the people from the Golden
After
Ring
staying
residence,
for 3 days,
and behind them were
the 2 of
hundreds
them
of
had
people.
become slightly more familiar
Everyone's
with the
hands were
Empress
tied
and
up,
could finally
and their
speak a few
clothes,
words with her,
which used to be gorgeous,
Renbachin
were now
brought them
dirty.
around Shanghai for
Beside
2
this
days
group of
and even
people,
made a trip
there
to
were dozens of
Disneyland.
winged cavalry warriors
His parents
riding their
didn't play
mounts
much,
and moving
but
forward
the Empress
slowly.
and the little monk Xing Ruo
Behind
had
these
a good
people,
time.
there was a large number
They
of
realized
carriages.
that the Empress would only have
However,
more
the
expressions
carriages
when facing
weren't
their
loaded
son,
with people,
but with looted
she looked
goods.
a little more human.
Sir,
At other times,
when
she
everyone
was
arrived
cold.
at the foot of the city,
However,
the winged
this
cavalry
made them feel a
warriors
little
came up
better.
to greet them.
If she was
Was
this
everything
cold
all
after
right along
marrying
the way?
someone, they would really marry an
Renbachin
ancestor.
asked.
You are
Sir,
a grown
they
up
were
and
very
know what
well
to
behaved.
do. We won't
Not
meddle
bad.
too much.
Did you meet the
But
army from
when
the
are you
Protectorate
bringing
of
her
the
home?
South?
We have
Sir,
met before,
there are still
but
a
we
few
haven't met our
cities that haven't
relatives
been
yet.
cleared along the way.
We have
and
to
they
get
will
to
only
know
arrive
them.
in a few days.
Mother Ren said.
Renbachin nodded.
She was
looked at the
calculating in her
uneasy
heart.
people behind them, and said,
If she brought this
"Release them."
fairy-like lady back, her relatives and friends would
He
definitely
then
be
raised
shocked.
his voice and said,
At
"You
that
aren't
time,
here as prisoners,
she would definitely
but as a
set up
sign
30
of friendly
tables for everyone
coexistence
between the
see.
people of Tianjin
There will
Basin
be a
and the
chance."
Aboriginals.
Renbachin
The people of
half-heartedly
Tianjin
sent them
Basin
through
have
the
many
airport
misunderstandings
security
about the
and finally heaved a sigh
Aboriginals
of
and the
relief.
imperial court.
From today
I hope
onwards,
that when you
he
return
would
in
be
the
a king
future,
again.
you can dispel this
That
misunderstanding.
day, he saw someone
Awkward
talking about
silence.
a comic called Under One Man. He
Misunderstanding.
liked this name very much.
There was no misunderstanding
He would
at
take
all.
a look at this comic the next time he
Renbachin
came
didn't
back
mind
to
and
see what kind of
continued.
qualities
I gave
were
you a
needed to
chance
be
and was
under one
lenient.
man, but it doesn't mean that
As
I
a
will always
king,
be lenient.
he had to work hard to enrich
After
himself
entering
and
the
improve
city,
himself.
be well behaved and know your
After
place.
sending the 2 of them off,
Unless you are
Renbachin
stronger
brought
than the one
Empress
hanging
and
at the
Xing
top of
Ruo
the
to
city shopping
mall.
Sir
A
Ren,
burly man,
who is that
a
on top
beautiful
of the city
woman,
wall,
and a little monk.
Jean Changkong
No
had
matter
been
how
staring
one
at the
looked
few
at this
people
family
behind
of 3,
Renbachin
it
since
looked
the beginning.
weird. He had seen
Passers-by
these
cast
people
sidelong
before.
glances at them.
4 of them were highly
course,
ranked experts
even without
in
the little
Lingshan
monk,
sect.
Just the Empress alone
He didn't
would
expect
also
them to be
attract the
following
attention of
behind
everyone.
Renbachin.
After
The
buying
other
a bunch
2
of
were
things,
experts from the
the
hidden
3
village.
returned to the villa.
It seemed like the Lingshan sect and Qingyun's sword had surrendered.
Hot pot
Who was
base,
that on top
and
of
the
the
Empress's
city wall?
clothes together and said to the
Based
little
on what
monk,
Renbachin
"Hold on
said,
to me.
this person's
I'm going to
identity
transform you
wasn't
into the
simple.
magic monk. Xiao
Spirit
Yuan.
spiriting you. Does it hurt?
I'm sure you have heard
Also,
of him.
I'm Xing Ruo, not
Renbachin
Xiao Yuan.
sneered. The little monk said
The 4th
timidly.
most powerful expert in
There
the
was
world.
a ripple in the
Spirit
air,
spiriting
and the
you.
3 of them them and the two big bags disappeared from the room. How did Tinyu appear here? was already used to this kind of transmigration. To him, it was as natural as drinking water and eating. It seemed like it should be like this. Sometimes, the Three River Basin he would forget that this was not an innate ability that he had,
but something that had inexplicably appeared in his body, where the land was fertile and the population density was the highest. He was immediately drenched by the torrential rain. This piece of land only occupied 1/10 of Tianjin pitch-black surroundings and the pouring rain. Of Tianjin Basin's population. A second ago, he was still in the villa in Shanghai. There were a total of 7 cities in this area that dotted the plain like 7 pearls. Where is this? These 7 pearls were controlled by the 3 major factions. Couldn't care less about the little monk. The 3 major factions had mobilized their troops to this area. When he left, causing the people in the 3 River Basin to be in a state of panic. Where's the house? They didn't know if there was going to be a war. Where did the house go? A few days later, the news gradually spread, and the people in the facial expression was very ugly. Going to be a war. It had only been a day and a night. It wasn't between the 3 major factions, but against the aboriginals. How could she accept this? The south of the city is recruiting soldiers. The Empress's aura surged. I heard that the salary of energy rose from the ground, and they can get 2 taels of silver. It was like a sudden clap of thunder that shook the entire city. Since you have nothing to do, why don't you go and take a look? Silhouettes appeared in the ruins. With your physique, you might be able to make a name for yourself in the army. Greetings, Your Majesty. Even if I'm alive to earn money, Your Majesty will forgive us for being late. How many people can survive a war with the barbarians in front of the Empress? Those barbarians are all 8 feet tall and have bloody mouths like wild beasts behind Renbochin. They're not the people who landed were all winged cavalry warriors. Just say that you're a coward. They were originally patrolling the surroundings of the barbarians and immediately rushed over when they sensed the entire city. Many people in the north have been killed. The Empress and people are running into the mountains to survive. Greetings, Your Majesty. In my opinion, since we're going to die anyway, we might as well fight for it. After sensing the Empress's aura, we might even be asked to make a contribution and become a minor official in the future. According to his estimation, the Empress's body would need at least 10 days to recover. It should be true. He didn't expect that in just a day and a night, the Empress had actually recovered when she returned from an unknown place. Now, the Empress frowned. People are in a state of panic and thinking about how to escape if the barbarians much weaker than when she left. If that's the case, seemed like we have to fight with our lives on the line. Furthermore, the middle-aged man walked along the bandaged wounds on his body, listened to the idle chatter in the alley, and continued walking. Your Majesty, it's raining heavily now. Who spread the rumor of a massacre. Why don't you follow me to another place and explain in detail? It also aroused the blood of many people. Lead the way. In just half a month, the 3 major factions under the heavy rain. New soldiers. Renbochin and the Empress then realized that the area of the ruins would probably be weak in the knees if they encountered the residents that they originally lived in. The middle-aged man walked to a mansion in the city and broken bricks and tiles. A moment later, a middle-aged man of similar age came out and laughed in surprise. Everyone arrived at another residence along the street. Why are you here? Hundreds of winged cavalry warriors stood upright in the rain. Greetings, the big fish or the shrimps at the bottom of the water. Yuan and they were all hurriedly ran to the Empress's side with umbrellas and opened them for her. However, since it didn't make a difference why don't we go to the surface of the water to see how spectacular the scenery is. The middle-aged man said with a smile. The Empress had already calmed down. Let's enter the mansion and sit down first. She went to the backyard with Qin Yuan and Hong Yuan. After a while, the 2 of them sat down and waited for the servant to pour the tea and changed into clean clothes. The senior brother then asked, "Where is this? How is it?" The small monk had been in a daze ever since he came to this world. Master suffered some injuries and is currently recuperating. No matter how he looked at it, this wasn't As for the sect, don't mention it. There were also those tall and strong men with arms that could run horses. Master went to Every one of them made him want to hide far away. What happened in the sect? The ancient race had been spending his time in the monastery, practicing and reciting scriptures every day. The people inside were quarreling incessantly. He never had the concept of transmigrating to another world. I heard that the hidden village and spiritual mountain sect have surrendered. This will be the world you live in from now on. When the senior brother heard this, he was shocked. The ancient race was actually asking them to surrender. Wait here, I'll go take a look. Didn't the ancient race always kill without leaving any survivors? Renbochin left the small monk in the room and hurried out. The spiritual mountain sect had surrendered. He thought that the small monk should be able to calm down by the time he came back. From the spiritual mountain when he came to the hall, famous in the martial world for decades. Qingping, Zongshin, Not long and Gongxing were also there. Sword had even gathered everyone to besiege in addition to Shiwanyo. Qingping also had serious injuries. Surrendered. The bandages wrapped around his body
junior
were
brother
red,
nodded.
and one of his ears was missing.
I heard that the person in charge of the ancient race this time,
even though
he
he didn't look like he was injured, he was coughing up blood.
Then who could it be?
How did they become like this?
I still remember that there was news that Qi Xiao
found a husband who wasn't from the
One
ancient
had to
race.
know that these three were cardinal heaven experts.
Yes, this
and
person
each of
is
them
called
could take on
Renbachien.
3 ordinary spirit
This
will
time,
experts.
he is the person in charge of the surrender.
All 3 of them were seriously injured.
It is said that
What
he promised
exactly
to
was
let
going to
bygones
happen?
be bygones as long
What
as
kind
the
of
ancient
person
race
could injure them
surrendered.
like this?
He also promised
talk
that the
about it
people
when
of
Her Majesty
Tianjin Basin
arrives,
could go
Shi
out
Wanya
and live
answered.
together with the Aboriginals in
He
the
didn't
future.
care that Renbachien and
When
the
the
Empress
senior
were
brother
missing
heard
for a
this,
day,
his expression changed
After
drastically.
all, a subject couldn't
If this
possibly
was
watch
said,
over Her
many
Majesty
people
all
would be
the time.
tempted.
What else do you
Furthermore,
know,
Her
Junior?
Majesty managed to avoid
This time,
being shot by
it
the
was the
spear
people
during
from the
the
hidden
day,
village
and her
the
injuries
Lingshan
were
sect who
completely
came
healed
to
by
the
the
sect.
time she returned.
As a result,
This was
the
a good
sect has been
thing.
quarreling incessantly for
After
the past
waiting
few
for
days.
a full 15 minutes,
Many
the
people
Empress
think
slowly
that
walked
since
in with a
Qi
frosty
Xiao and the
face
winged
and a
cavalry
murderous
have
look
arrived in Wu
eyes.
City. The 3 major
It seemed
forces
like she
are
had
no
heard
match
something
for
from
them no
Qin
matter
Yuan
what.
and Hong Wuan.
Furthermore,
Tell
the
me
other
in
party
detail.
has promised to
The
let
Empress said
bygones
coldly
be
after
bygones
sitting
and let
down
us
at
go
the
out.
seat of honor.
Otherwise,
Yes,
when the Aboriginal army
Shi Wanya
arrives,
immediately
I'm afraid
recounted
that everything
the
that had
entire
happened
sect
in
will
full
be slaughtered.
detail. When the senior
In fact,
brother heard this,
it was very
his
simple.
expression changed. Spiriting you
What did
suddenly
Master
appeared
say?
in Wu City, said
Master
some
didn't say
disgusting
anything,
things, and fought with everyone.
However, I saw that Master didn't agree.
Shi Wanya
So I
explained
wanted to
such a
ask
simple
Senior
matter
for
for
your
the time
opinion.
it took to drink a cup of tea.
After all,
Senior has
he
better
told the
foresight
Empress
than
all the
of
methods
us.
and characteristics that
The
Tinyu
senior
had
brother
used.
gritted his teeth and said,
Finally,
no matter
he
what,
said,
I will
now
not
that your
surrender.
Majesty has recovered,
I
I
know.
can finally rest assured.
Senior, your parents
How many
died
casualties
in the hands
were
of
there?
Butcher Shi Wanya.
The Empress asked.
The hatred of killing your parents
We are
is
guilty.
absolutely irreconcilable.
We
weren't a match for spiriting you, and our injuries aren't light. The junior brother nodded. However, if he comes
they
again,
want to surrender,
we can still
let them
fight
do
him.
so.
The winged
In this
cavalry
way,
suffered
no
the
matter
most
what
casualties,
happens in the future,
with 157
the sect will be able to preserve
dead
its
and 74
foundation.
seriously injured.
Since the sect is quarreling,
Among them,
it
more
must
than
be
30
because the
can
other
serve you
party
after
has conditions for
recuperating.
surrendering.
Bang!
Is it because the disciples
Upon
are not
hearing
allowed
this,
to join
the
the
Empress
revolutionary
immediately
army
smashed
formed
the
by
table
the 3
beside
major
her into
forces?
pieces with a strong murderous
The senior
look.
brother raised his head
Of
and
the
asked,
200 people, even if
Senior
only
is
30
right.
could return to the team,
the
there
junior
would
brother
still be
smiled
200
and nodded.
casualties. Can't they
One
remove
had
our
to know
names from
that
the
the
sect?
winged cavalry had a total
The
of
senior brother asked
1,500
again.
men.
This is
After
what the sect
several
is
battles,
arguing about.
there were less than 1,000
The
of them
junior
left.
brother sighed slightly.
What
What
is
is
there
there
to
to consider
battle?
about
There were
this?
less than 800 of them left.
Expel those of us who want to
It
fight
could
from
be
the
said
sect,
that they had
and
lost
the rest
nearly
of us
half
can
of their
just
men.
surrender to the north.
Even the Empress
If
was
the
heartbroken by
revolutionary
such a
army
loss.
wins, with us around, the
Renbachien
sect won't be
didn't show it on the
affected,
surface,
and we can be
but he
recruited in the
secretly
future.
heaved a sigh of relief.
If the Aboriginals
Although
win,
the winged
then the
cavalry
sect will be
suffered
able to
heavy
preserve
losses.
its foundation.
Fortunately,
He
the
and the
senior
Empress
brother
had
said
returned to Earth to
disapprovingly,
hide.
It was
Senior,
fine as
do you
long
think
as
we
the
have a
Empress
chance
was
of winning?
fine.
The
What
junior
followed
brother
was
asked.
shock.
Even
The
if
monk
the
had
odds
sent
are
4
slim,
peaches
I'm
at this
willing to
time.
fight with my life on the line.
Apart from 2 for himself,
the senior
the
brother
other
then
2
cupped
were
his
used
hands
to treat
and said,
the Empress's
Junior,
injuries.
this is a serious matter.
Could he have predicted this?
I'll go and see the governor
If he could
first.
really predict this,
then
I'll
it was
talk to
simply
you when I'm back.
terrifying. How
Senior,
could there be such a
please
person
wait.
on Earth? Is there anything
He wasn't
else,
a human
Junior?
anymore.
Master
He was
has
simply
always
a
been
god.
concerned about you, so
Where's
he asked me to
Tinyu?
bring something for you to
I
protect
want to
yourself.
kill him and
The
suppress him
junior
in the
brother
palace
said.
forever. The
Thank
Empress
you for
spat out
worrying
each
about
word
me,
with a
my
cold murderous
unfilial
intent.
disciple.
The senior brother felt warmth in his heart when he heard
Chapter
this.
487.
He watched as the junior
Where's
brother
Tinyu?
untied
The
a
Empress
cylinder from his
asked.
waist. It seemed
This
like
was
she
left
couldn't
behind
wait
by
to kill
Master.
him. I don't know.
It said that it was obtained from
He's
Baiju
quite
Pavilion in
fast,
Great
and we were
Xia.
all injured, so
It
he
can
escaped.
shoot out 3 rounds of
However,
bone-piercing nails.
I think he'll come again in a few days.
If you are in danger, you can press
After
it
all,
here.
he thought that your Majesty's
Following the
injuries
junior
would take
brother's
more
action,
than 10 days
the
to
cylinder
heal.
inadvertently faced the
As
senior
long
brother,
as he hasn't
and
given
3
up,
bone-piercing
he'll definitely
nails
come
suddenly
again.
shot out from the cylinder.
Is Tinyu injured?
Junior,
Renbachien asked. Before the senior
He's
brother
worthy
could
of being
react,
the 4th
he was
most
hit by
powerful
3
expert in the
bone-piercing
world.
nails, and blood
Even though we
spurted out from
besieged
his
him and
chest
killed
like a
so many
fountain.
winged cavalry warriors,
Senior,
his injuries were
Renbachien
much
is
lighter
more
than
vicious
ours.
than you think. If he had good
There are
medicine on
3
him,
Earth will
he would have
experts in the
recovered more
sect.
than 60 to 70%
As long
by the
as one of
time
them
he appeared
joins the
again.
Revolutionary Army.
However,
Their whole
he
family
would
will
definitely
be
die
executed.
against the fully recovered
If there
Empress,
are 6 men,
Shi
will
Wanya
experts,
exclaimed.
as long as 2 of them join,
This Ting Yu really
their whole
deserved
family
to
will
die
be
for speaking
executed.
disrespectfully to the
Although
Empress
there aren't
and
many
killing
people
so
in
many
our
winged
sect,
cavalry
many
warriors.
of them have entered the army over
Even
the years.
though his character was bad,
Unless
his
all of
strength
you are
was
killed,
solid, the foundation of the sect will not be able to be preserved.
The Empress snorted.
The junior brother
Even though she
sighed with a
didn't want to
pained
admit
look
it,
on his face.
from what everyone said,
Did
Ting Yu
Master
was
send
indeed
you?
a little
The
stronger
senior
than
brother
her.
asked weakly as he
The
lay
most
on the
important
ground with
problem
blood
was that
dripping
even
from
though
his
the
mouth.
Empress could achieve this level of combat power by burning her blood
Master
essence,
and the chief
she
aren't
wasn't
willing
willing
to
to
surrender.
surrender battles.
Therefore,
If the battle with Ting
foundation
Yu
of the
dragged
sect
on for
can't be
too long,
preserved.
the Empress would lose.
If nothing goes wrong,
She could
everyone
kill
will
Feng
die.
Sanlu in such a short
The
period
junior
of
brother
time,
continued to
but it was
sigh.
difficult to kill Ting Yu.
Then why did you?
From this point of
Fortunately,
view,
that Sir
even though
Lin
Ting
gave
Yu
me
was
another way
originally
to
the
live.
4th or 5th most
As
powerful
long as I
expert
kill
in
a
the
fellow
world,
disciple
he
of
was
the
much
same
better than
strength and
Feng
bring his head to
Sanlu.
surrender, I can
From
live.
the battle between the Empress
That's
at Mount
the proof
Wu
of
and
my
Ting Yu
allegiance.
at Wu City, the Empress
still
faced
want
more
to
than
live.
10 spirit will experts.
Senior brother wants to take
Even
revenge,
though she was injured,
and so do
she
I.
still managed to kill a few
However,
of them.
I'm different from your
Even
enemy.
though Ting Yu was able to escape
My enemy is
unscathed,
Xia Kun,
Wanya
the
and the
capital
rest
of the
were
southern
seriously
metropolis.
injured.
The
You don't
main
know
problem
him,
was that
right?
Ting Yu was better at prolonged
Even
battles
Master
than
doesn't
her.
know him, and I
The
haven't told
Empress
anyone.
knew her weakness,
So
she
therefore,
sometimes
if
risked
I
getting
surrender,
injured to kill
I
her
can live,
opponent, and I can take revenge.
Another point was that after
Why
each
not?
battle, the Empress would
Therefore,
only have 30% of her
borrow a
combat
head to
power
prove my
left
loyalty.
and would need at least a month to
The
recover.
people in the sect live together.
This was also
and if I
her
am
biggest
discovered,
weakness.
I won't even have the chance to
Is he
escape.
really blind?
The risk is
How
too
does he
great.
fight?
After
Is it his
thinking
sense of
about
smell
it,
or
I think
hearing?
it's the easiest to kill
Ren
you.
Baqian still found
The
it
junior brother
unbelievable that a
said
blind
softly,
man could be
squatted
so
in front of the
powerful.
senior brother, and
However,
said,
if
"You
it was
guys
his
have
sense
no
of
chance
smell,
of winning
it
if
would
you
be
fight
easy
with
to
those
deal with."
barbarians." A
Not
fortified
to mention
smoke bomb
Chi
would
Xiao
definitely
and
make him
Wanya.
wish he was dead.
How can the 1,500
If it was his
Earth
hearing,
will
a
experts of the
sonic
winged
bomb would
cavalry
probably make him
resist?
regret coming here.
Senior, you are
It's
going
not
to die
the sense
anyway.
of smell and hearing. Why don't you help me?
These two senses are
In the
easily
future,
affected
there will be
instead of
someone to
sight.
visit your grave during
If
festivals.
he had such a big weakness,
Phew.
he wouldn't be the 4th most powerful
Phew.
expert in the world.
The senior brother lay
The
on the
Empress
ground,
rejected
panting
Ren
and
Baqian's
spitting out
idea.
blood.
Your
The
Majesty is
bone-piercing
right.
nails had pierced
Shi
his
Wanya
lungs,
agreed,
making him unable to speak.
Maybe he's using
and his
his
eyes
skin to
gradually
feel the air
lost their
around him.
luster. Either that, or their sense of smell and hearing are more outstanding, so that they can
Chapter
avoid their
496.
weaknesses as much as possible.
Commander,
Gong Jing said.
Liu Qing's cloud cavalry
That's
officer
easy.
Zhang Guo was
As long
assassinated
as I
and his
create
head
a
was
blast
taken
of air
away.
in the surroundings,
Although
won't he
the
become
city
blind
was
again?
searched, no one was found.
Ren Baqian immediately came
It is
up
said
with an
that
idea.
it was his junior who did it.
In his mind,
In
it
the
would be
residence
very
of the
difficult
warlord
to
of
make such a
Shuang
huge
City,
fan.
a middle-aged man sat in
However,
the seat
it was
of honor
possible
and
to make a
listened to the
bomb that would
reports.
set off a shockwave
This
after
man
the
was Xia
explosion to
Kun,
disrupt
the
him.
commander of the southern metropolis.
There's no need for that.
And he was also the leader of the
I
southern
want to see
metropolis.
what kind of means he has.
Among the 3 major
Empress
powers in
interrupted
Tianjin
him.
Basin, the North
I'm
Alliance
guessing that
had
he
the
has a
highest
unique
leader.
way of
The
sensing
southern
his
metropolis
surroundings
had
with
the
the spirit.
commander, and the green
I'm
bellflower
afraid
was
he
led
can
by
see
a
more
lady
clearly
with the
than a
flower
normal
queen as their
person,
leader.
the Empress explained.
It's because of that news
Only
again.
then did Ren Baqian
These people
temporarily
deserve to
suppress the
die.
idea of throwing a fortified
Xia
smoke
Kun
bomb,
slammed the
a sonic
table
bomb,
angrily,
and an air bomb at the same
Inform
time.
everyone of this news.
All of you may leave.
No matter who they see,
The
whether
Empress
they are
waved
old
her
friends
hand,
or fellow
stood up,
disciples from
and
afar,
left the room.
even if they are blood relatives,
Qin Yuan and
they must
Hong
be on
Wang quickly
guard.
followed behind her with
Everyone.
umbrellas.
After
After the
the
Empress
left,
everyone will be
Ren
in a
Baqian
panic.
asked,
How's Lin
although
Chala?
spreading the news of the massacre
She
has
suffered
caused
some minor
instability
injuries,
in the hearts of
but
the
it's not
people.
a big deal.
It is only the civilians who
Shi
are
Wanya
panicking.
added, however,
This has
the few
aroused the
people who
morale of
surrendered
many
to Principal
civilians
Ren
and
can
made our
still be of
recruitment
some
a lot
use.
smoother.
Originally,
However,
I thought that it would be
incident has
difficult
caused
to
all the
realize
officials
Principal
to feel
Ren's
uneasy,
plan, and that it would be easier to
How
just
can we
kill
do
them.
anything if we are always on
However,
guard against
from
each
the
other?
looks of it now, they
Someone
have really
stepped
surrendered.
forward and said,
It's somewhat
So
beyond
what if
my
you say it?
expectations. If this
Ren
continues,
Baqian laughed.
I'm afraid that there will be more
He
casualties.
really didn't
expect Qin Yun's sword
Moreover,
and that Ling
how can
Shan's
this
sect
matter be
spirit
hidden?
will expert to actually
I'm
lend a
afraid
hand.
that many people know about it
In this
before
way,
you and me.
it
wouldn't be good for him to treat them too harshly. It is better to tell everyone so that they don't die at the hands of their fellow disciples or relatives. She was wearing a light undergarment and was sleeping soundly on her back in the room. Pass down the order. She seemed to be fine, in a deep voice, but her face was a little swollen as if she had been beaten with a stick. Offer a large reward for those who sneak in. Renbochin stretched out his finger and poked her swollen face. The other party's message is very clear. Jumped up, and clawed
if they don't
at
surrender
Renbochin
now,
twice.
they will be massacred.
It hurts.
Either they surrender or they join the volunteer army.
Lin Chaola glared at Renbochin,
There is no third
whose
option,
face was all
Xia Kun
scratched.
said.
Ouch.
Finally, send more experts to guard the
took a
Wang
deep
estuary.
breath and cursed in his chest.
Those who want to surrender
He
to
was
the
the
north.
one who was in pain now.
Kill them.
Rest well.
The situation in the North Alliance,
Renbochin grabbed
the
a
green
small
bag
bag
of white
and
rabbit
the southern
creamy
metropolis
candies
was
and
similar.
threw it to Lin Chaola as a reward.
Renbochin's move caused
However,
quite a stir
when he
in
thought
the
about
three
how a
major
bag
powers.
of white rabbit creamy
From
candies
time
had
to
resulted
time,
in a claw
there were
mark
news
on his
of
face,
experts who had joined the army
felt
being
that his good
assassinated by
intentions
fellow
had been
disciples,
and
and
there were
dog.
even cases of internal strife.
He got up and went out to touch his
This
face.
made everyone even more anxious.
There was a trace
and their
of blood
morale
on his
dropped
hand.
significantly.
He was disfigured.
In Wu City, Renbochin
After a
was sitting in the
while,
main hall with
Renbochin
6
met
people
Qin Yun's
standing in
sword
2
and
rows
Zhuo Qing
below
from the
him.
Lingshan
sect in another
Jing
room
Yu,
with a bloody
Zhang
face.
Boding,
Zhuo Lang,
both
and
of them
Zhang
were
Hexing
mainly
were from the
focused on
Lingshan
restraining
sect.
the other party, so
Among
nothing
them,
serious
Zhuo Lang
happened.
was Zhuo Cheng's nephew.
Only Zhuo Qing was slightly
the other
injured
two
and
were
Qin
Xu
Yun's
Nong
sword
and
was
Xia
slightly
Yunbing.
worn out.
They were from
Please
the hidden
take a
village
seat.
and had met Renbochin
Thank
more
you
than
for your
once.
hard work this time.
Renbochin smiled
The 6 of
and
them
invited
looked
them
at the
to
tip
take
of
a
the
seat.
spear sticking out of
Both of
Renbochin's
them
head
remained
with a look of
silent.
astonishment on their faces.
It couldn't be better for the two
It
of
was
you to make
indeed
such
rare
a
to
choice.
see a spear tip sticking out
I'm
of
not
his
a
head.
heartless person, so
How
I
are
can't
those people
disappoint
now?
the two of you.
Renbochin
crossed his
picked
legs,
up a cup of
fanned
tea
himself
and took
with
a
one
sip.
hand, and took a sip of
Previously,
iced Coke
I
with
said
the
that I
other.
hope that the people of
The cola
Tianjin
bottle was
Basin
right
and the
next to his
Aboriginals
hand.
can be of use to your majesty
It was
in
hot
the
these
future.
2 days, so it was
Both
better
of you
to
can
drink
recommend
iced
a
cola.
few useful people to work
As
under
for
me
ice,
first.
it was also easy to
When
make.
the time is right, I can
Saltpeter
find a
could
suitable
be found
job for them.
everywhere, Renbochin said with
Sir,
a smile.
most of them are sincere in
Upon
seeking
hearing
refuge with
Renbochin's
you.
words, both of
Zhuo
their
Qing
expressions
cupped his hands
changed.
and said,
Even though these
most of
words
them,
were simple,
but there's still a small
recommending
number
a few
of them
people
who
to
aren't
work under the
sincere.
person in front of them was much better than
Renbochin
rewarding
raised
them
his
with some
head slightly.
benefits.
Everyone's
What was the
hearts
identity of the
tightened.
person in front of them?
However,
This
he
is
was
normal.
Qi Zixiao's husband.
There's no knowing what's in
From
a
the
man's
looks
heart.
of it,
He had a lot of
with so
authority
many
and was
people,
highly valued
it's hard
by
to
Qi
guarantee
Zixiao.
that there are some who can't
By
see the
working under
situation
him,
clearly
they would at
and don't
least
know
have a
when to
big
advance
backer
or
in the
retreat.
Aboriginals' court.
Inform the
In
two
the
gentlemen
future,
to take
when
action when
Tianjin
it's time
Basin
to
was
do so.
pacified, the other party
You can't
would
be
also look up to
soft-hearted
them.
now.
Furthermore,
If it's my turn to
working
arrange
under
for
him was
people to
also the
take
first
action,
step for the
kill
people
without
of Tianjin
mercy.
Basin.
Yes.
Not to mention the fact that the
Zhuo
Prime
Qing
Minister was a
responded.
rank 7 official.
Also, do you know
the
that little
benefits of
baldy
working for him were much
get
greater
two
than
people
those
to
of some
follow him
low-rank
and
officials.
stay away from him?
Even if the
Just
people
don't
of
let anything
Tianjin
happen to
Basin
him
left
and ignore
everything
everything
else
else,
in the future,
Renbochin
they would
said
still
again.
have to bow down to the Aboriginals. Is there
However,
anything else?
with his support,
it would be a
Sir,
completely
there's
different
news
story.
that the entire Shaoshan sect has
Renbochin's
surrendered
words
and is
weren't just
rushing
a
to Wu
benefit to
City.
the two of them, but
Not
also an
bad.
attitude and a message
When
to
they
them.
arrive, bring them
Thank
to
you,
me.
sir. After all,
Zhuo
we
Qing
still have
cupped
to
his
show our
hands and said,
sincerity.
Qin Yun's sword
Renbochin recalled
nodded.
that day in that room.
He then
Someone
waved
said
his
that the
hand
person
and
in
said,
front of them
"You
wanted
may
to stabilize
leave."
his power and occupy
After
a place
everyone
in the
left,
imperial court.
Renbochin opened the collar of his
Therefore,
shirt.
he wanted them to surrender.
It's really hot today and
Now,
making me irritable.
it seemed that this possibility
He got
was
up
very
and
high.
went to the Empress's room in the
If
courtyard
this was
next
the
door.
case, they and the person in front of them
Your
would
Majesty.
rise or fall together.
Oh.
If the other party
The
fell in
Empress
the
looked
future,
up at Renbochin
they wouldn't be able to get any
lowering her
benefits.
head to look
at the book in her hand.
However,
they had no
she
other
had nothing to
choice.
do these days,
So she casually flipped through some of the ancient books and records
Chapter
that she had plundered from the
488.
various sections.
By the time Renbochin returned to
took
his
out
room,
an antique
it was
wooden
already
box that
very
exuded
late.
a strange fragrance and
The
placed
little
it on
monk
the
was
table.
leaning against the bed and
Your
dozing
Majesty,
off.
I went to the warehouse to
eyes
take
were
a
a
look
little
this
red,
morning and
and it
found this
seemed like
thing.
he was crying.
If it was in the hands
An
of
8
someone
or
else,
9-year-old
it would
child
be a
was
waste.
suddenly brought to a strange world
Although it's
surrounded
not
by
good enough
burly
for
men
you,
whose arms
there aren't
could
many
run
things
horses.
in this world that are good enough
It
for
was
you.
normal for the little monk to be
This thing is
frightened.
barely good enough for you.
After all,
The
image
Empress
of the
raised her
Aboriginals
head
often
and
looked
gave
at the box.
Renbochin the illusion that he was in a bandit's lair.
opened the box,
and the
Now,
item inside
he was somewhat
immediately
used to
appeared
it.
in front of her.
After
It
entering
was
the
a golden
mandal
hairpin
level,
with an
his
egg-sized
strength and
ruby
weight
carved
began
at
to
the end.
skyrocket,
And his muscles
It was a
bulged.
picture of a phoenix spreading its
Although
wings
he was
and
still
about to
very
fly.
thin and weak compared to the
Not
Aboriginals,
only was the phoenix
this was a
carved
problem
very
of his small
lifelike,
frame,
but the ruby also seemed His image was already starting to resemble that of a bandit. As long as light shone on
Occasionally,
it would emit
he would look in the mirror and reminisce
about the handsome and fresh meat of the past.
The Empress's eyes immediately lit up when she saw it.
Face. She took it
Other
out
than his
and looked at it
biological
carefully.
parents, there weren't many
There's
people
another
who could
characteristic
recognize
of
him
this
now.
item. He didn't become bald,
smiled
but
as
he
he took
became
it from the
heavier and
Empress's
stronger.
hand.
With
This
a wave
could be
of it
seen
in
from
the
the
heavyweight
and
and
lightweight
lightweight
boxing
boxing
rings.
rings, clang sound was immediately heard.
The more oppressive he was.
It sounded like the chirping of birds and
Wake
also
up.
like the sound of stringed
Go
instruments.
sleep in the room next door.
It is said that the cry of a phoenix is like
pushed
this.
the little monk awake.
Renbochin said as he put the
Where is
hairpin
this?
back in the Empress's hand.
This was the first thing
The
the little
Empress
monk
was
said
even
when
more
he opened
delighted
his
when she
eyes.
saw this.
Dayo,
She put down the book in her
Basing.
hand and played with the hairpin.
You will live here from now on.
After a while,
Will I still be
Renbochin
able
saw
to
that
see
the
my
Empress's
master?
interest had waned and said,
Unless you really
"Why don't
become
I
a
put it
Buddha,
on for your
don't
majesty?
even think about seeing your master."
The Empress spread out her hand.
Upon hearing this,
the little
Renbochin
monk
picked
burst
up
into
the hairpin
tears
and
walked to the Empress's
"This
back.
is an opportunity that your master
He gently
found for
touched
you."
the Empress's fine black hair
Renbochin
and
took
comforted
off the
him.
hairpin.
After
Her
waiting
hair
for a long
immediately
time,
fell down
the
like a
little monk
waterfall.
finally calmed down.
Renbochin held
Go
the
to
two
sleep
hairpins
first.
in his hand and fell into
We
deep
can talk
thought.
about the rest later.
Why did her hair fall down
Renbochin
after he
pushed
took
the
it
little
off?
monk into the room next door.
How did she tie
laid
her
on the
hair
bed,
up?
and entered the
Empress sat
visualization
there
of
for a
fire.
long time, but
Inside
Renbochin
the room
still
was a
didn't move at
volcano.
all. Looking
This
down
made
from
the
the
Empress
bottom
a
of the
little
mountain,
impatient,
the
and
black
her fingers
mountain
lightly
peak had
tapped
streaks
on the
of red
table
climbing
twice.
up and winding down.
After thinking about
These
it,
red
your
lines
majesty's
were all
bare
rivers
face
of
is
lava.
already devastatingly beautiful.
The closer it was to the top of the
Why
mountain,
do you need this
the
thing
denser
to
the lava
embellish your
became,
majesty?
and the higher the temperature.
Renbochin walked in front
At
of
this
the
moment,
Empress and
the
said
metal chain
seriously
was
as he
near a
placed the
stream of
hairpin
lava
back
at
into
the
the
foot
box.
of the mountain.
I feel that
arched
your
itself
majesty's
up and
current
tried to
demeanor
dip
is
one
already
end into
flawless,
the lava,
and you don't need it anymore.
Its entire body shivered.
You said you don't need it
Then
after you spread
it
my
laid
hair
comfortably
down.
beside the river of
The
lava.
Empress wasn't moved by
From time to
Renbochin's flowery
time,
words
it would
at
dip
all.
one end into the river
She
of
raised
lava
her
and then
eyebrows
quickly
and
pull
asked,
it back, shivering
"This?
all over.
I feel that your
Renbochin felt
majesty
that this
is
guy
already the
seemed to be
most
soaking
beautiful
his
scenery
feet.
in the world.
At the very least,
Adding or
it
removing
looked
even
quite
a little bit
realistic.
would destroy this perfection.
After
You
water
were standing
and wood,
behind me
it
just
was
now,
now fire,
so I could only
completely
see your
following
hair.
the order of the 5 elements.
Bang!
Presumably,
Ouch.
the next one would be
After
earth,
a while,
and then metal.
Renbochin collapsed on
After
the chair
completing
with a
the
bloody nose and
visualization of
swollen
wood,
face.
his strength skyrocketed
It was still
from
cooler
700
where the
kilograms
Empress
to
was.
900 kilograms.
Not only was there a fan blowing ice cubes,
His speed,
but there was also the cold
musculoskeletal
murderous
strength,
aura that
and
the Empress
ability to
emitted
take
from
hits
time to
had
time,
also improved,
making people feel comfortable
After
from head
completing
to
the
toe.
visualization of
The
water,
next day,
Renbochin's
it was still the
kidneys
same
functioned
room.
much better.
Zhuoqing
The
strode
kidney
into
was
the
a
room
place
with a
where
bag
essence
and
was
threw it on the
stored.
ground.
It was divided
5
into
or
innate
6
essence
heads
and
rolled
acquired
out.
essence, including
Sir
growth
Ren,
and development.
these are the ones who aren't well behaved.
He had gone
at the
from
moment.
120 kilograms to
Zhuoqing
200
cupped his
kilograms
fists
and said
and
calmly.
it seemed like it was still growing.
His gaze was calm.
He did not know if it had
the
anything
lives
to
of the
do with
entire
this.
Lingshan sect and
In
the future
addition,
of the sect
he was
were in
full
the
of
hands
energy
of the person
and didn't
in front
get
of him.
tired easily.
Even if one of
With
them was his
regards to
disciple,
this,
he had no
Renbochin
choice
was rather
but to be
satisfied.
ruthless.
Good
He had
kidneys
already
were
given them
truly
a
good.
chance, but Zwolen's
After
message
completing
yesterday
the
made him know that he
visualization of
couldn't
wood,
wait any longer.
his heart
and lungs became
Mr.
stronger.
Zwa is a smart person.
The lungs were connected to the qi in the body. They
You
were
know what is
responsible for
important,
breathing,
what can be
controlling
done,
the skin
and
and
what
hair,
can't be done.
and opening the orifices
I
to
am
the
most at
nose.
ease with you.
However,
As
Renbochin
Renbochin
discovered that his
he
lung
glanced at the
capacity
heads
had
on the
greatly
ground and
increased.
said,
It's just that some
He
people
took a
aren't
deep
that
breath,
smart.
and like a whale swallowing
Not only
water,
are they courting
he
death,
could hear the
but
sound
they
of the
also want to
airflow.
drag others down with them.
In the past, he
This
would have
kind of
drowned in the
person
water
is like
in
a
2
rat's
minutes,
poop
but
spoiling
now
a
it's
bowl of
6 minutes.
minutes.
It's
Climbing
good that
Mr.
Mr.
Zwa
Zwa
knows
what
what
to
without
do.
panting. I will have
It
to
seemed
trouble
to be
Mr. Zwa to
useless.
pay more attention in the future.
Furthermore,
the shortcomings
at this
were
moment,
very obvious.
Renbochin was more at ease
For example,
with Zhuoqing.
if he encountered gas poisoning
Now,
or poisonous
Zhuoqing
gas,
was completely
he would
tied
have
to
to
him,
lie down
and there was
before
no
others
way
could
out.
react.
With
In
such
short,
a person taking
the benefits
care of
of
things,
completing the
Renbochin could
visualization
save a
of
lot
wood
of trouble.
seemed to be smaller than
At the very least,
visualization
the winged
of water.
cavalry warriors wouldn't
However,
be able to tell if someone was
Renbochin felt that
uneasy
it
or
shouldn't
not.
be so simple.
On the contrary,
With the
it was
completion
easier
of the
for the Lingshan
visualization
sect
of
to
wood,
detect this.
Renbochin finally felt
I
the
still have
essence
to
and
ask
blood
for
in
a
his
favor
body
from you.
transform into wisps of gas
One of these
that
people is
circulated
my
throughout his
disciple,
body,
and I hope Sir Ren
the
can allow me to
smoothness of
bury
this
him
part
properly,
might be related to the
Zhuoqing
lungs.
said.
Renbochin had high expectations for the visualization of fire. After all,
Chapter
fire
497.
corresponded to the heart, and
In
the
the
heart
following
was the source
days,
of power.
Wu
City began to bustle
At the
with
same
activity.
time,
there was also the
first,
saying that
the
the heart
reinforcements
contained the
from the
spirit.
Protectorate of the South finally
Renbochin
arrived.
guessed that completing the
5,000
visualization of
soldiers
fire
swept through
would
almost
greatly
half of the
improve
north.
his strength. Upon
At the
entering
same
Tianjin
time,
Basin,
it would also
the
nourish his
reinforcements
spirit and lay the foundation for the earth at the same time. For the next 2 days, the entire Wu city was tense on the
directly
outside,
opened their gates
and the atmosphere
surrendered.
was even more oppressive.
This reduced casualties and saved a lot
the
of
Empress
time.
sat in the courtyard.
For cities that
The
surrendered
Empress
directly,
rarely spoke.
the reinforcements passed through
She
the
had been
city
resting
without
with her
stopping,
eyes closed
leaving
to
only a
adjust her
few dozen
condition.
people to guard the city.
She was waiting for Tinyu
After
to come
all,
and kill
a
him
few
here
dozen
and
manual
now.
experts were considered
She
a
had to
formidable
calm down
force
every
in an
time there
ordinary
was
city.
a big battle.
Even the elite
After
soldiers
all,
of Great
he was the
Xia
fourth
needed
most
10
powerful
times the number
expert
of
in the
soldiers
world.
to contend with them.
Even
let
if his
alone
strength
these
wasn't
defenders
at its
with
peak,
bone knives.
the Empress didn't dare to look
Even
down
if
on
something
him.
happened, as long as
Furthermore,
no Earth will
sparring with
experts or
such an
above
expert
attack
was in itself
some
a
of
form
these
of
soldiers
tempering
would
for
be able
one's
to
strength.
escape.
During
When
the battle with
Rinpoche
an
returned
expert,
from the
one's
Golden Ring
entire
residence,
body's essence,
the winged
chi,
cavalry
and
warriors that he
spirit
sent
would
out
fuse
almost
into
wiped
one,
out all the
and
Earth's
one's
will
mind and
experts and
spirit
above
would
in the
become
north.
one.
Even if there were any experts
This
who
would allow
escaped,
one to
they
tap
were
into
now
one's
hiding in the
potential
dark
during
and
a
didn't
life
dare
and
to
death
show
confrontation.
themselves. There
As
were
a
also
result,
a few
after
cities that
every
resisted
battle,
resolutely.
one's strength would improve to
The
a certain
separated
extent.
troops gathered together and
At the
attacked.
Empress's current level,
After
every
breaking
step
through the
forward was
city,
very difficult.
all the officials were killed.
Furthermore,
and the air in the
her
entire
status
city
made it
was
very
filled with the
difficult
smell
for her
of
to
blood.
find a suitable opponent.
As for the chaos that
Therefore,
occurred after they left
regardless
because
of
there were
whether
no
it was
officials,
Feng Sanlu
they
or the
didn't
previous
care.
battle with the numerous
How to
spirit
settle
will
the city
experts from
down was a
Tianjin
problem
Basin.
that others had
Even
to
though
consider.
there was a reason for it,
Killing all
still
those who
extremely
dared to
happy.
resist was what they should do.
This battle with Tinyu was
Under such
extremely important to
circumstances,
her.
It took a full 40 days for them to
stayed
reach
by the
Wu
Empress's
City,
side
which they
and
could have
didn't
reached
speak.
in 15 days.
He only fixed his
They
gaze on
also
the
wiped out
Empress's
the
face
scattered
and stared
resistance
fixedly
forces
at
in the
this
north.
heroic face.
The person who
In
led the
particular,
reinforcements
those
was an
red
acquaintance
lips
of
of
hers always
Rinpoche,
made him want to
Hong
kiss
Qing.
them. He was Hong
Rinpoche's
Wu's son
gaze
and
made
Hong
the Empress's
Xian's
face
father.
itch a little.
Previously,
After
during
a
the
long
battle
time,
with Great
she
Xia in
opened
the
her
north,
eyes and
Hong Wu
stared
had
at
led
him.
the reinforcements from
Have
the
you seen
protectorate
enough?
of the south to the north.
I haven't seen enough in my
Rinpoche
entire
had met
life.
him before, and this was
I
the
always
second
wonder
time
how
he
can
had
there be
seen
such
him.
a perfect person in
Wu
this world.
City was just a small city.
It's simply
and
a
the
creation
arrival of
from
more
heaven
than
and
4,000 reinforcements almost filled the
Rinpoche
city.
smiled.
At the same
The Empress
time,
wrinkled
the
her
problem
nose
was
and
the
wanted
lack
to
of
laugh.
food in Wu City.
However, she
Previously,
immediately
the
put on a
1,000
straight face
soldiers and
said,
800
"I want
winged
to
cavalry
rest.
warriors had eaten up
Go and
almost
do
all
what
the
you need to
provisions
do."
in Wu City.
Rinpoche
Even the
was
rations
chased
of
out
the
of the
defenders
courtyard
were
by the
looted.
Empress.
Now that this
He looked
batch
up
of
at the sky
reinforcements
and was
had
thinking
arrived,
about how to
Wu
take
City was
revenge on that
completely
old
out
fart.
of food. Xiao Baichong.
Your Majesty,
There's
this
not
guy
enough
really
food
didn't
in the
stop.
city. We can only
Previously,
last
the
for
Zhu
3
Mu
days at
elders,
most.
Lu Qi,
Shi Wanya
and now
told the
Tinyu
Empress
were all stronger than the other.
In my opinion, everyone in the
Rinpoche
city
didn't
can
know how
only
much
keep
he had to
5
spend to
days
hire
worth of
these
rations.
people.
There
The
was
rest
also
must be
Su
handed
Qing.
over.
Although
It
he
should
was
be
a
enough
traitor,
to make up for
he
a
was
week's
also
worth
sent
of
by
rations.
Xiao Baichong to cause trouble for Dayo. He was also
If we
the
only
one who
send them
sent
out
people
from
to
Wu City,
persuade the
we'll be
Yun
forcing
nation
the
and the Jin
civilians
nation
to die.
At the end
Even
of the
with
day,
5 days
he
of
was
rations,
originally living
he
well
could
in
only
Long
live
City,
for about
but
10
now
days.
he was running around every day.
Looking at the crops outside
the
the
main
city,
culprit for
it will
all
take
of
at
this
least
was
a
this
month
old
before they
radish.
can be harvested.
He couldn't possibly be
Rinpoche
fighting for
shook
his life
his
here
head.
every day while he
Does
led a
Sir
drunken
Ren
life
have
in
any
the palace
ideas?
of Great Xia, right?
Wu City has to provide
A
grain.
good neighbor was someone who reciprocated.
However,
Wu City was not the
Why
only
not throw
place to
1,000
send
skunk
supplies.
bombs at the palace?
Every city in the
This
north had to
time,
hand
there
over
was no
2,000
need for
don of
smoke,
rations, which was
He
100
could directly
carts.
throw 1,000
They
concentrated
would be
skunk
responsible
bombs
for
at the
their own
palace of Great
personnel and
Xia.
losses. It was
In
guaranteed
this way,
that the fragrance
30
of the palace
cities can
would
have
hit the
60
people
days
and
of
linger for
rations.
3 months. 60 days
Rinpoche
is enough to
had
quell the
personally
rebels in the
experienced the
south.
power of concentrated
It
skunk
doesn't matter
bombs.
even if it's not enough.
Its
Rinpoche
absolute
said.
lethality was astonishing
As
and
long
wasn't
as they
inferior
took down
to
the
any
3
large-scale
rivers,
biological
there would be a large
weapons.
amount of rations there.
He didn't believe that he
In
wouldn't
this
vomit
world,
blood.
1 stone weighed about
As long
50
as he
kilograms.
announced that he would take responsibility for
2,000
this matter in
stones
the
weighed
name
about
of Dayo,
100,000
Xiao
kilograms,
Baichong wouldn't
which
be
was
able to
barely enough
tolerate
to
this.
feed 6,000 soldiers
He wouldn't
and
even be
800
able to
winged
avoid
cavalry
sending
warriors
troops.
for 2 days.
Otherwise,
There was
where
a
would
lot
the
of dignity
dignity
of
of
the
the
royal
Tianjin
family
Basin,
of Great
but
Xia
very
be?
little livestock.
As long as he sent
Ordinary
troops again,
soldiers could
Su
only eat
Qing's
1 or 2
opportunity would
kilograms
come.
of millet a day,
while the winged cavalry warriors needed 25
when
kilograms.
Great Xia was in chaos.
These days,
the smoke from kitchen
chimneys in the city had never stopped.
Stab him in the heart.
It had to be said
However,
that the Aboriginal
no matter how
strong
he looked
fighting
at it,
power was
Su
supported
Qing
by
would
their
be
huge
taking
advantage
appetite.
of this situation. Previously, when
Ren
they fought with
Bachyan
Great
had to scrape
Xia,
some benefits
there were many
from him.
livestock in the north and abundant meat. This wasn't obvious.
Chapter 489.
After all, ordinary
As
meat
time
could provide
passed,
5
the
times
atmosphere
more
in the
energy
city
than the
became
rations.
more
and more oppressive. Now that they had arrived
Everyone
in
knew that
Tianjing
Ting Yu
Basin,
would come again.
this problem was completely exposed.
If it were any other expert,
They would wait for the Empress to recover that the Aboriginals were really a bunch of
However,
foodies.
Tingyu wouldn't do so.
The nearest cities, Sifeng and Chindi,
there was only one
less than
possibility.
2 days to reach Wu City.
Tingyu was recuperating.
The further cities,
the later he
and
came,
the better his
recovery
recovery
would
days
be.
to reach here.
On the morning of
The
the
rations
day,
from these 4
there were
cities
people
will be able
selling
to
breakfast
last for
on
8
streets.
days.
Although
With
it wasn't
this
as
time,
lively
they
as
would be able to
before,
deliver the
it was still
rations to the
somewhat
faraway
lively.
cities.
As time
Therefore,
passed,
there
the
was no
residents
need
of
to
Wu
consider
City
the issue
realized
of
that the
rations.
Aboriginals didn't harass the
After
civilians,
Rinpoche
which
finished
made them feel
speaking,
more at
the
ease.
Empress nodded.
Unknowingly,
As for the issue
a man
of rations,
appeared in the city.
do as Principal Ren said.
The sound of his bamboo
In
cane
addition,
tapping on the
transfer
stone
a batch
slabs
of livestock
echoed far
from
and
Gu
wide.
City over.
Spirits
Before the
spear
war,
Tingyu.
they have to eat their fill.
Not long after he appeared
Otherwise,
in the city,
they will
he
be
was discovered
weak,
by the
the
winged
Empress
cavalry.
said faintly.
As soon as the
Yes.
news spread, countless
She
people
Wanya
landed on their
replied.
roofs and stared coldly
In
at
addition,
the only
we
person
have stayed
walking
here
on the
for
streets.
too long and should move south.
As for the rest, they had
Now
long
that the
since
rebels
hidden
have
in their
retreated
houses.
and gathered in the Three Rivers
Many
Valley,
people heard
they
someone
probably
walking
want
on
to
their
rely
roofs
on the
and
Wang
occasionally
estuary
saw
and
a huge
Dalong
foot
Ridge,
trampling
these
on the
two
roofs.
strategic locations to
They
fight
hid in
against
their
the
houses
army of
feeling
the Imperial
nervous and
Court.
didn't know what was going on.
They have abandoned 6
Your
cities
Majesty,
between the Three
Tingyu
Rivers
has
Valley
appeared.
and Wu
A
City.
guard hurriedly
Ling Dong,
reported from the garden.
Jiangbei, Liugo,
I got it,
Jinsha,
the Empress said with
Pingjiang,
her eyes
and Han
closed.
Pen.
Just
I will
the day
report to
before
him when he is
yesterday,
almost
the
here.
garrisons of these 6
When
cities have already
Rinpoche
been
heard that the other
withdrawn.
party was coming, his tensed heart, which had been tense for the past 2
Presumably,
days,
the people of
felt
these
relieved.
6 cities are in chaos
Many
and
things
suffering.
were like this.
They are looking
There
forward
were
to
all
the army
sorts
of
of
the
guesses
Imperial
before it
Court,
happened,
hoping
but
to
when
see
it
Her
really
Majesty's
happened,
face as
it
soon
was
as
useless to
possible
think
and
too
rescue them
much.
as soon as possible.
Now,
It all
now,
depended on
the
the battle
time is
between the
almost
Empress
right.
and the other party.
In my opinion,
After
we should
a while,
first take down
someone
these
came
6
to
cities
report,
and face
Your
the rebels
Majesty,
across the Three
Tingyu
Rivers
is 400
Valley.
steps away from the door.
This will increase the pressure
Only
on them.
then did the
Rinpoche
Empress open
said.
her eyes.
He had heard about the
snow-white
withdrawal of the
glow in her
garrisons
eyes
of these
was
6
somewhat
cities from the
dazzling to
practitioners who
Rinpoche.
had rushed to Wu City
The
in the
Empress
past 2
stood
days.
up and walked out.
He had to admit that these
Rinpoche whispered
practitioners
to the
were
guard,
really useful
"Get
at
someone
times.
to bring out the box from my room."
Rinpoche was even considering
Inside were the
using these
concentrated
practitioners
skunk
to form
bombs
a
and
cavalry
sonic bombs
battalion
that he had just brought back from
Whether
Earth.
it was in Tianjin Basin
Although
or
these
against
things
the other
attacked
countries,
indiscriminately,
they would be
the
useful.
Empress had experienced it once
She
and was
Wanya
definitely more
scratched his
resistant
head.
to odor than the other party.
Looking forward.
Furthermore,
How can you tell,
Rinpoche guessed
Principal
that since
Ren?
the other party was blind,
Why do I see
his
that
sense
they are
of
so
smell
scared?
and hearing should be stronger than
She
ordinary
Wanya
people.
pointed at the spear tip and the metal
Therefore,
chain on
he would be more or
Rinpoche's
less
head and said
affected.
subconsciously,
In a
"So
fight
Ren,
between
they
experts,
have appeared again.
this was what they fought for.
It's fine.
If the
They are
situation
just
was not
kids who
good,
find
he
everything
could throw
new
these
and
2
can't
things
stay
out.
put.
Perhaps
Perhaps
it would be
fine after
effective.
some time.
There's no need for that.
Rinpoche didn't care.
The Empress's
A
voice
heavy-grade
came from the
weapon
front.
would only gain consciousness
Since
after
he
the
came
death
alone,
of its owner.
why would I do such a
The
despicable
newly born
thing?
consciousness was like a baby,
The Empress replied
looking at
without
everything
turning
new
her
and
head.
active.
Upon
This was
hearing what
very normal.
Rinpoche said, she
A
knew
kitten
what he
or
was up
puppy
to,
would still sniff around.
but he's quite despicable.
It would be fine after a long time.
When dealing with
Didn't
people
the metal
like
chain
him,
rarely
you don't have to
appear now?
be too open and above
She
board.
Wanya stared at
Rinpoche
the iron
whispered,
chain wrapped around the
"Do
tip
you
of the
think I'm
spear.
the same as him?"
It looked like
The
a whip.
Empress asked.
After some discussion,
Her
She
Majesty
Wanya
is
sent people to
accomplished in
inform
both
the cities
literature
to
and
prepare
martial
provisions,
arts,
and has benefited the common
Rinpoche
people
looked
for
for
thousands of
Wu Qing
years
and
to
asked
come.
him to deploy manpower and set off
Rinpoche
with 2,000
immediately
soldiers
changed
to
his
suppress
tone.
the riots in the cities
Then
that had
watched
lost
from
all the
behind.
officials and garrisons.
When everyone left the mansion,
At the same time,
they saw an
he
old
would
man
do a
dressed
good
in
job
black
of walking over
pacifying
from the
them.
other end of the street with a bamboo cane in his hand. The sound of the bamboo cane hitting the stone floor reached everyone's
Chapter
ears.
498.
Renbochin
A few
sized him
days
up
later,
carefully.
the Empress's carriage
Was this
arrived
the
at
spirit
Jiangbei
spear
City.
Tingyu?
He
Jiangbei
looked to be in
City
his
was the
50s
last
or
city
60s,
to enter the Sanjiang
with a goatee
district.
and a face full of
The
wrinkles.
Wang estuary was 80
His
kilometers
ordinary
south of
facial
the city,
features looked
and the
disgusting
Sanjiang
when they were
district was
squeezed
to the
onto
south
his
of the
face.
Wang estuary.
Qi Zixia,
The winged cavalry
I paid a visit
entered the
last
city
time,
first,
but I
followed
didn't
by the
expect to
Empress's
leave
carriage.
empty-handed.
There were
Now,
traces of
I finally
chaos in
see
the
you
city.
in person.
Not far
Very
away,
good.
there were
Tingyu
charred
said
houses
loudly as
and
he stopped
bloodstains
50
that hadn't
meters
been
in front
wiped
of
off.
everyone.
After
With your
all the
strength,
guards and
there are
officials
only a
left,
handful of
it was
people in
normal
this
for there
world
to
who
be
can
chaos
defeat
in
you,
the city,
and there aren't many who are
Those
worthy
civilians
of
who
you.
didn't know much were
It
fearful.
You and I are a perfect match.
A little spark could start a prairie fire.
Why don't you marry me? At this
Even
time,
though I don't have
the
anything
evilness of
valuable
human
on
nature
me,
would be
I
revealed.
can still take out a mere betrothal
This was
gift.
unavoidable since ancient
Ting
times.
Yu's old face was smiling
This
like
was
a dead
part of human
chrysanthemum,
nature,
and he even revealed a
when the
mouthful of rotten Shaoshan sect
teeth.
arrived at Zhongbei,
No matter
the
how
city
Renbachyan
began to show
looked at
signs
him,
of chaos.
he felt a surge of anger rising from the bottom of his
was
heart,
4 days late
and he
when
wanted
he sent
to
his
suppress
men.
this old bastard in a
It was said that when the army and the
You said
Lingshan
the
sect
same thing
arrived,
twice.
the city was already in
Don't
chaos.
you have anything else to say? The shops were basically
You left the last
smashed,
time,
burned,
and this time,
and looted.
you specially came to deliver your
shops that sold necessities such as
I'll
food
keep
and
it,
salt.
the Empress said faintly.
Many civilians in the city
So
were
your
killed or
injuries have
injured in the
recovered.
chaos. No wonder
Previously,
you are so confident.
a group of people escaped from the
However,
city,
there
and
are
the
at least
army killed
8,000
another
to
group
10,000
to
people
suppress the
who
riot.
want my head. This city,
Cheesy
which originally
Xiao,
had a
if you want my
population of
head,
100,000,
I'm afraid you will have
was
to
only
queue
left
for
with
another
60,000
100
when the
years.
Empress and her men
Ting
entered
Yu
the
carefully
city.
sensed and then laughed.
What are they doing?
Did
Who
Xiao
allowed them to
Baichong
be
send
here?
you alone?
The Empress sat in the
Ren
imperial
Baichen
chariot and looked at the
He
commoners
wanted
who
to
were
know if
standing
Ting
by the
Yu was
side
the
of the
only
street
one,
with their heads
or if there were
bowed and
other
shivering.
people who had entered Tianjin
They are
Basin.
welcoming you, just like what you
Xiao
saw in Mon
Baichong.
City. Ren Baichen said
but
while
you are
holding a
wrong.
wine cup in one hand.
I wasn't sent by him.
Ren Baichen said as
His
he held a
things in
wine
exchange
glass
for
in
a
one
favor
hand.
from me.
As
It's
for the
just a
person who arranged
transaction.
this, it should be
You are
someone from the
Cheesy
Lingshan
Xiao's lover,
sect, right? You are just a
The
little
people of
worm.
Lan City are my people.
Commit suicide. They sincerely
Ting Yu
support me and
chuckled.
welcome me. The last
And
three
these
words
people,
were like a demonic sound
the
that
Empress
poured into
said
Ren
faintly.
Baichian's ears. These people are
He
also
used
your
a special
Majesty's
method to
people.
say these
Ren
three
Baichian
words.
said faintly as he looked
It
at
could
the
only be
civilians
used
who were
to
deal
fearful.
with people who were much weaker
Your
than
Majesty,
him. But it could
if a
affect
ruler
the mood
treats
of others
his
with
subjects
his
like
voice
his
and
own
make them
hands
feel
and
that what he
feet,
said was
his
right.
subjects will treat him like a
However,
confidant.
when these three words
If a
entered
ruler
Ren
treats his
Baichian's mind,
subjects like
he
dogs
immediately
and
felt
horses,
that what Ting
his
Yu said
subjects
was
will
right.
treat him like a fellow countryman.
There was indeed no meaning
If
in
a
living,
ruler treats
and it
his
was better to
subjects
die.
like dirt,
His subjects will
eyes
treat him
turn
like an
gray.
enemy. These people are still fearful.
At this moment,
the metal chain
as long
that was
as they can
soaking
live
his
and
feet
work
in
in
a sea
peace
of
and
knowledge
contentment
suddenly
in your country,
sprang up.
they will sincerely
The metal
support
chain,
you like the people
which
of
was
Lan
only a
City
few
in the
meters
future.
long, suddenly
Who said
extended
this?
into the sky.
It makes sense.
It went beyond the
Empress
volcano
praised.
and even the sky. It was said by the
In
ancients.
Ren Baichian's
sea of knowledge.
He said a
It
lot
looked
of
as if it
things,
was standing
and they were
between
all
heaven
very
and earth
reasonable.
and connected
Ren
to the
Baichian
fields.
replied after thinking
In
for
just
a
a
while.
moment, the metal chain
In the future,
retracted and
tell
turned
me
into
more
a
about
spherical
him.
cage at one end.
To be able to say something like
Inside
that,
the cage,
I'm sure he's
there was
not
a
an
worm-like
ordinary
thing that was
person.
moving left and right.
As the Empress spoke,
The metal
she
chain
looked at
shook
the commoners.
the spherical cage from side to side as if it had found something fun and was
I
reluctant
don't really
to let
like
go.
them.
Whether
Ren
they
Baichen
like it or
became
not,
absent-minded
they are
for
a
a
moment
moment
before
before
coming back to his senses.
The reason why His Majesty
He
disliked
immediately
them was
realized
because
that
they
he
were
was almost
restless.
hit by this move just now.
However,
there was also
the
a
others
reason
weren't
for
affected,
this, and it was obviously
Among them,
targeted at
there were
him.
people
who kept
He
instilling certain
immediately
ideas
opened his
into
mouth
them and scolded.
In
It
fact,
takes a lot of
as long
courage
as they
to
are
live in this
appeased
world
and
with
mentally
your appearance.
dominated.
They can do a lot
You
of
are
things.
wasting food and polluting the
After a
environment
few
while you are
decades,
alive.
a new generation of young
If you
people
die,
would grow up,
you will be
and
making
they
a
would become
small
His Majesty's
contribution to
true
the beautiful
subjects.
lives of the people of the world.
Furthermore, these people
Why
were
don't you
not living a
commit
good
suicide?
life. They
Even
were
if
just
it's not
trying
for
their
the sake
best
of
to
others,
survive.
it's on account of the fact
As long
that your
as
mother
they can
used
live
to
and
live
work
in
in
peace
peace
and
in this
contentment.
world, I think most of
You
them
have
won't have
polluted
any
the
other
world
thoughts.
that she
once lived in.
Just like the people
You
on
are
both
simply
sides,
unworthy of
they
being
had
a
just
son.
experienced chaos and pain.
Remember to drown yourself in the toilet
Now that the
so
army
that your
had
corpse
pacified
doesn't
the
contaminate
city,
the soil
they could return
elsewhere.
to their peaceful lives.
Ting Yu was stunned.
Although they seemed to be
Ren
afraid
Baichen
now,
wasn't
that's
affected
only
by him
because
at
they
all
don't
and even
understand His
scolded him.
Majesty.
And he
How
even
would His
scolded him
Majesty
in
know
such a
that some of
nasty
them
way.
aren't rejoicing in their hearts?
Where did all these curses come from?
Ren Baichen poured the wine
Following
into his
that,
mouth,
Ting Yu
held an
smiled
empty
sinisterly
cup,
and praised,
said,
"This
"Sharp-tongued
flower
brat,
wine is
I'll
really
tear your
good.
mouth in a while.
Although it's like a
Let's
raging
see if
fire,
you can still
it has
curse
a
then.
sweet and glutinous taste
You won't
and a
have
hint
that
of floral
chance.
fragrance.
I will crush
Qin
your head
Yuan
in front
and
of the
Hong
palace
Yuan,
square."
who were beside
the
him,
Empress said
glared at
coldly.
him and unwillingly poured
Build
the
a
wine
public
for him.
toilet on top of it and
The two
soak
of
your
them
head
had
in it.
painstakingly picked
You
many
can
kinds
go
of
in and
flowers
take a
to
dump
brew
on
this
the head
wine
of the
for Her
world's fourth
Majesty,
strongest
but this
expert
guy
for
had
just
drunk
one
so
cup
much
of
of it in
coin.
the past 2 days.
I'm sure many people
What
would be
happens
interested.
to these people is something you
You
need
can
to
also
consider.
pay 20
the
copper
Empress
coins
said
a
faintly.
month
and 2 taels of silver
She wasn't
a year.
good at this kind of thing.
You will also be given a
Since Ren
VIP
Baichen
seat
could
in
do
the
it
public
well,
toilets,
she would leave it to
priority
him.
access, no
He also
queues,
needed some
and free
achievements
toilet
to establish
paper,
himself
Ren
in the
Baichen
imperial
added.
court.
I'm quite
Although
interested.
he had done many
Ha.
things before,
She
nothing was
Wanya
more
burst
dazzling
out
than
laughing.
pacifying Tianjin Basin.
I'm also interested. If he couldn't do it
Zhong
well,
Shen and
he would
Qing
kill
Ping
all
laughed
these people.
loudly. The
Courting
Empress was
death.
staying at the warlord's residence in
Yu's face
Zhangbei.
darkened completely.
However,
The
it seemed
bamboo
like the
cane in
warlord's
his hand
residence had
shattered,
also
and his
suffered a
spear
calamity.
appeared in his hand.
Many places
He
had
pointed it
traces
at
of
the
being
crowd.
burnt, and some of the
No matter
decorations
how
in
bad
the
his
residence had
character
also
was,
been swept
he was
away.
still the fourth in the world.
Even though the people from the
Who would dare
Lingshan
to insult
sect
him
had
like
arrived
this?
earlier had already arranged for
Moreover,
people to renovate the
Renbachian's
residence and
scolding
made a
was
batch
so
of items
nasty
to
that even
decorate
he
it.
couldn't stand
The
it.
patchwork of things in the
When it
residence
came to
made it look
scolding
even more
people,
shabby.
he was really no match
It
for
gave
that
people
kid.
the feeling that everything
He
in the
didn't
residence
gain
was
any
out of
advantage
place.
verbally, but he almost
For
went
example,
crazy with anger.
the flowers in the courtyard that had
Soap
just
has
been
been
dug out
toilet.
from an unknown place looked
Charge
like
fees.
leaves. There were also a few chairs and tables
simply
in the
courting
hall.
death.
One of the
Even though
chairs
his
had some
character
color
wasn't worth
differences,
mentioning,
and its
he was
style
still
was
one of the
different as
top
well.
experts in the world.
It was obvious that it was
spear
patchwork.
technique was extremely terrifying.
As for the inside of the room,
his spear
there was
moved
no
the
need
wind
to
and
talk
clouds,
about it, and the air in
the
Wu
bright
City
red
seemed
and
to be
green
stirred up
quilts
by
made
it.
Renbachian wonder if
Everyone
those people
felt the
had
surrounding
different
airflow
aesthetic
start to
standards.
spin, and a gale started to blow.
Even
Your
though
Majesty
Tinyu was still
please
standing
take
in
a
his
rest
original
here
spot,
first. His spear tore
I
through
will
the
get
air,
someone to send
and the
betting
silver
over
tip
later.
of the spear occupied everyone's
Renbachian
field of
walked
vision.
around the room and retreated.
Even an Iron Man would be
After
torn to
bidding
pieces
farewell
by
to
this
the
spear.
Empress, he summoned the
This
people
was
from
the
the
terror
Lingshan
of the fourth
sect.
most powerful expert
Are there
in the
any
world.
people from the south in the
The
city
Empress
these few
moved
days?
and struck with her palm.
What's the situation in the
Boom.
south?
A wave of air
Renbachian
forced
asked.
everyone to retreat.
Sir,
Dozens of people have arrived in the past few days
would
and
have
are
been
waiting
able
to
to
kite
kite
the Empress. As for
The
the
walls
south,
around them
the rebel
collapsed,
army has
followed
arranged
by
for
the
many
houses in the
experts near the
courtyard.
Wang estuary to
The
intercept
stone
and kill
slabs
those
on the
who came
ground
to seek
between them
refuge
turned
with
into
you.
powder.
It is said
There
that
was
the
even
same
a 3-meter
situation
wide
is happening
and
at Mount
5-meter deep
Dulong,
gully on
and
the
many
ground.
people have been killed.
This was the mark
Rebel
of this spear
army.
attack.
Renbachian
Boom.
squinted at him and said,
The buildings
"Your
on
thinking
both
is very
sides collapsed
dangerous."
with a loud rumble.
Sir, it's
Crash.
my fault.
Amidst
It's the
the
rebel
broken
army.
tiles, a head with a
They are the
face
rebel
full of
army,
dust and
but
dirt
they call
popped out.
themselves the rebel army.
It was a slip of the tongue, and I hope you won't
Chapter
blame me,
490.
the man said as he broke out in a
Boom.
cold sweat.
Boom.
Remember, we are
Boom.
officials, and they are bandits.
As the two of them fought,
You
the
are
buildings
working
on
for
the
me
street
and Her
collapsed one
Majesty.
by one.
Always
A
remember
black
your
and a red
identity.
figure shuttled back
Renbachian
and
reminded
forth
him
amidst
again.
the rising dust.
Yes.
Tinyu flicked his
How many
spear on the
people were
ground,
sent by the
sending
rebel army
pieces
to
of
intercept
stone
them?
slabs flying toward the
How
Empress.
strong are they?
However, they were
Renbachian
turned into
asked
dust by her
slowly.
jade-like palms.
There are more than 100 people
Purple
at the
thunder.
Wang estuary, mainly
Tinyu
from the
shouted
bamboo
as the
mountain
spear in
sect,
his hand turned
shouting
into a
temple,
Z-shaped bolt
and the
of
Yang
lightning and
sect.
struck at the Empress.
Among them,
There
the
are more
Empress
than 10
continued to
Earth-rule
resist with her
experts.
bare palms.
The Mount Dulong should be
Shockwaves
guarded by
rippled in
people
the
from the
air and
Mengxing
swept in
Pavilion
all
and the
directions,
Yujiang Gang,
causing another building to
In
collapse.
addition, there are thousands of
Renbachian
soldiers
was
stationed at each
dazzled by the
place.
battle.
However,
purple
that
pattern
was
on the
news
Empress's
from 3
face
days
was
ago.
so beautiful that it made his
Now
heart
that the
palpitate
Imperial Army is
incessantly.
here, they should know
He
about
wanted
it,
to sing a
and there should be
song,
some
but
changes.
he lacked an arrow.
Got it.
How much of Tinyu's
You may
strength has
leave.
recovered?
Renbachian
waved
asked
his hand and
Chiwanya.
pondered for a long time.
With his
after he
eyesight,
left.
he could only watch
If the winged
show and
cavalry
couldn't
were
see
to directly
much.
crush them,
The
most
other
of the
party might be
time,
unaware
he
of
couldn't
something
even
and
see
might
the
suffer
figures
some
clearly.
casualties.
Occasionally,
Now that the
he
winged
would see the
cavalry had
Empress's
suffered
red
clothes
casualties,
fluttering in the
not
wind.
to mention the Empress.
Her
Even he
skin was
felt
covered with
distressed.
purple patterns, which made her
Furthermore,
look mysterious
it was known
and
that there were
beautiful.
more than
I
200,000
can't
rebel
tell,
soldiers in the
but
south.
it's at least 80%.
At present,
There
maybe
were only
even
6,000
90%
Aboriginal soldiers here,
Chiwanya
including
said in a
800
deep
winged
voice.
cavalry warriors.
What are the chances of
Even
winning,
if the other
Your
party
Majesty?
were all huskies,
Swallow the
200,000
mountain.
huskies wouldn't be easy to deal
Tinyu
with.
shouted again as the spear in his
Renbachian
hand
thought
turned
about
into a
it and
giant
called
golden
Suichang
python.
and Qingyun soared over.
It bared its snow-white teeth
Sirs,
and opened
the
its
Wang
mouth to
estuary
swallow
and
the
Mount
Empress.
Dulong are currently guarded
The
by the
Empress
experts
didn't seem
sent
to
by the
know how to
rebel army.
dodge. Those
From the
righteous
start of
and
the battle
chivalrous
until
people
now,
are trapped in the
she
three
hadn't
rivers
retreated
and
or
may be
dodged
wiped
at
out by
all.
the rebel army at any time.
Renbachian recalled watching
I
the
would like
Empress
to ask
fight
the
with the
two of you
spirit
to
will
select
experts
some
from
experts from the
Tianjin
city
Basin.
to check out these two places
She didn't
and
seem
report
to
back
dodge
to
at
me.
all and mostly fought
This is
hard
an
with her bare
opportunity that I
palms.
have painstakingly fought
At this
for the
moment,
two of
the
you.
Empress twisted her slender
According
waist
to
in
Her
the air,
Majesty's
turned
instructions,
half a circle,
the army will
and waved her
directly
fingers
crush
up
them
and down
crush
as
them
if she
to
was tearing
pieces.
something apart.
Before the golden python in the air
However,
could even touch
in that
the Empress,
case,
there
it
was
would be
immediately
nothing for you
torn
to
apart
do.
from its mouth and turned
I
into
thought
golden
that since
specks
you were
of
the
light.
first to pledge allegiance to
A
Her
spear
Majesty,
flew back
you
into
will
Tinyu's
naturally
hand.
be treated better than others in
Prison
the future.
suppression.
However,
Tinyu
if you
caught the
don't have
spear
any
with one
meritorious
hand,
service,
spun it half
it will
a
be
circle in
easy
the
for
air,
others to gossip
and bent the
about
body
you.
of the spear into the shape
As
of a
such,
bow.
I have fought for the
Before
task
the
of
spear
gathering
even
information
landed,
for all of
the
you
air
in the
below
city,
the spear was
Renbachian
pushed to the
said.
sides, and a gully
I have
even
really
appeared
put a
on the
lot of
ground.
thought into this.
In Renbachian's eyes, he didn't see a spear strike. Instead, he saw a black mountain sitting on the tip of the
Chapter
spear and pressing
499.
down on the Empress. Let's go.
Boom.
Zhang
Both
Chongkong waved
parties
his hand
landed again, and the Empress was smashed down from the others in the courtyard, creating a huge crater on the ground. At this moment, he was carrying the black mountain in the sky disappeared. Ting Yu's spear beside him with the outer sanctum, drew a big circle behind him, the inner sanctum down at the Empress, the deputy steward Lu Jing, and the vault steward Zhang Qian. However, at this moment, they were also the Empress was in the pit and couldn't see anything. Master, why don't I go with you?
Ting Yu went down
Painting
quickly,
Fairy asked,
but he came up even faster.
Stay behind and take care of Kaisian.
He flew upward and
This trip
completed
is just
3,600
and there
degree
won't be
free
much
turn
danger.
in the air before he regained his
Kaisian,
balance.
I'll bring back some meat for
Blood
you.
trickled down from the corner of his mouth.
Kong waved his hand.
A red figure soared
After
into the
saying
sky
this,
and collided with Ting Yu
felt
again.
somewhat miserable.
Renbachian's
He
palms
actually
were
had to
sweating
bring
as he
back some
watched
meat
from
for
his
below.
daughter on the way back.
In theory,
The Empress shouldn't be
the
Golden
weaker
Ring
than
residents after all.
After
Yet
all,
he had been reduced
Ting
to
Yu
such
was
a
still
state.
injured and hadn't fully recovered.
However, even the winged cavalry warriors
this was
had
only
to eat
in
rice
theory.
double 6 times a day.
No one knew if Ting Yu had any
Naturally,
trump
they
cards.
wouldn't have any good meals.
Moreover, in a
It was
battle
already
between
good enough
experts,
that they could eat their
victory
fill.
or defeat was determined by a
Rice stubble
fine
was
line.
a common food in Tianjin
Being weaker
Basin.
didn't mean that one wouldn't lose.
It was somewhat similar to millet on Earth.
Fortunately, both of them were
It
equal
wasn't
in
delicious,
strength, but it was abundant.
Even if there was a fine line
Don't
between
worry,
victory
madam.
and defeat,
their
we
lives
will
wouldn't be
definitely
in
send the
danger.
chief back safe and sound.
Renbachian still had
Ling
Chihuahua
Siquan
and the others
on his
raised
side.
their thumbs,
Even
index
though they were
fingers,
all
and
seriously
pinkies.
injured, it shouldn't
This
be a
gesture
problem to
represented
restrain
a
Ting Yu.
promise.
Even
Thank
if the
you for your
Empress
hard
lost,
work.
her life wouldn't be
Painting
in danger.
Fairy bowed in return.
Stop pulling.
Let's go.
Renbachian
The
slapped
five of them
hand that
mounted
was
their
tugging
mounts
at
and
his
traveled
clothes.
along the long street to the
It was
south
a tender
of the city.
and smooth little hand.
When they arrived at the city
Renbachian
gate,
turned
they
his
threw a
head
sign
and saw
over for
Ling
the
Shaola
soldiers
sitting
to check.
behind him.
After
Her
leaving
face
the
was
city
covered
and
in
traveling
dirt,
3
and she was
kilometers
drooling
south,
as she stared
they
at the
saw
bag
more
of
than 20
sweets
people
hanging on his
standing or
waist.
sitting in groups of 2 or 3.
He grabbed a handful of sweets for Lin
Greetings,
Shaola.
everyone.
Renbachian
late.
turned his head and saw a red
Zhang
figure being
Chongkong
smashed
scanned the
down.
crowd
and saw people from the
Boom.
Lingshan sect, the
Heaven's
Nine Blade
Net.
sect, the
Ting
Shaoshan
Yu
sect,
shouted.
the General sect,
It was as if
and a few
countless
other small
meteors
appeared in the
sections.
sky and smashed
Other
toward
than the
Empress.
Lingshan
sect and the Golden
In
Ring
fact,
residents.
they were
The
countless
rest were
spear
small
shadows
sects
that
that usually
emitted a
only
golden
had
glow.
1 or 2 Earth will experts.
Clang, clang.
If
clang,
this was in the past,
clang.
the status of both
The sound
parties
of
would
metal
naturally
colliding
could be
different.
heard coming from the huge
However,
pit. Now,
other
Earth
than the
Net,
Lingshan sect,
which
Ting
had
Yu's
clung onto
voice was
Renbachian's
heard.
thigh, there
A
was no
golden ray
difference
of light
between
that
the
was
other
far more
sections.
dazzling than the other
As
spear's
Zhang
shadows
Chongkong
pierced
and
straight
the others
into the earth.
arrived, everyone got up from the
Renbachian
ground.
immediately felt a violent
It seemed
tremor
like the
coming from
5
under
of
his
them were the
feet.
last ones.
Not good.
Everyone is here.
Chihuahua's expression
Let's
changed.
set off.
Without
Su
thinking,
Xing, he grabbed
the chief of the
Renbachian's
Lingshan
clothes
sect,
and jumped
who
out.
was dressed in embroidered clothes,
Qin Yuan
announced
and
the
Hong
arrival
were
of
also
everyone.
brought away by Zongshen
His
and
seniors were
Qingping.
not coming, someone
Just
asked.
as everyone left the ground,
With
the
a
ground was
spiritual
covered with
expert in
countless
charge,
cracks.
even if there was an ambush
Following
at the mouth
which,
of the Wang
spear
estuary,
energy shot up
everyone
into the
wouldn't be
sky.
worried.
This
Uncle
area
Master's
was
will
filled with
also
streaks
go,
of spear
but
energy.
he will not show himself.
Bang! The
Ting
investigation
Yu
will mainly
collided with the
depend on
Empress
everyone
again,
here.
but this time,
When
he was
everyone
charging
arrives,
toward everyone
please
like
be
lightning.
careful. Where do
Do
you
not
think
be
you're going?
careless, Su Xing
Shi
warned the
Wanya
crowd.
shouted. The long saber on his back appeared in his hand, and a
It is
snow-white
said that
saber
there are
light
more than a
swept up
dozen
like a
Earth
waterfall
will
from the
experts
bottom
there,
to the top,
and their skills aren't inferior
when he made
to those
his
of
move,
us here.
He threw Renbachian
That was
toward
news from a few
Qingping.
days ago,
And
However,
there might be other
at this
experts
moment,
around now.
Ting Yu's spear tapped on
In
the
addition,
saber light.
there are about 5,000
His body made a
soldiers on the
turn
mountain.
and swept past Ting Yu.
If they surround you,
Not good.
it will be difficult for anyone below
Qingping
the
shouted
spirit
angrily,
level to escape.
but it was already too late.
This time, we're mainly here to
Renbachian was
investigate.
originally thrown into the air.
If there's no need, don't
Fortunately,
fight with anyone.
he was used to being thrown and didn't
Evacuate
panic.
immediately if anything happens. Just
Sect
as he
Master
expected,
Su,
a
don't
big hand
worry.
grabbed his collar and
We're
caught
not
him.
reckless people.
However,
Why was he
everyone
getting
said,
further and further away
in
from everyone?
fact, none of them wanted to
Ting
fight.
Yu.
It
You are
wasn't
one
that
of
he
the
was
top
afraid of the
experts in the
battle,
world.
but that they had been sitting
How
at the
could you
same
do such a
table,
thing?
discussing how to kill
Why aren't
Chi
you putting
Xiao.
Principal Ren down?
But now, they had
Qingping
sided
grabbed
with the
Hong
Imperial
Yuan and
court.
landed on a pile of rubble
When
while
facing the
shouting
other
at Ting
party,
Yu.
he always felt that he was in the
Renbachian.
wrong.
When everyone headed to the
Wang
I was caught by this old bastard
Renbachian was
Ting Yu.
writing and drawing on a
The
piece
person
of paper.
behind me is Ting Yu. What are you writing?
Renbachian's
The
forehead
Empress
was
looked
immediately
over and
drenched
saw
in
that
sweat,
it was written in
and his heart
simplified
felt as if it was
Chinese,
being
with
squeezed
the words
tightly by a big
embroidered
hand.
uniform guards written at
Let
the
him
top.
go. I
The
feel that
Empress
it's a
bounced
pity
up
not
again
to make
as
use
soon
of
as she
these
landed
people.
and chased after them.
In the past, the
Qi
Imperial
Xiao,
Court
you
didn't know
better
much
stop.
about anything outside of Dayo
Otherwise,
because the
I will
Aboriginals
strangle
were
him
more
now.
suited for killing enemies
Ting
on the
Yu's
battlefield
gloomy
and were
voice
good
sounded
at infiltrating and
Renbachian.
investigating. I'm finished.
Furthermore, the Aboriginals were
Renbachian
too
felt
easy
like
to
cursing
recognize.
10,000 times. Even a blind
blind person could tell that they were from Dayo based on their figures and landed on the ground.
but he felt that
now
his
that we
legs
have
were a
these
little
people,
weak.
we can cast our net
Ting
and
Yu,
at least have
what
some
are you trying to
understanding of the
do?
movements of
The
other
Empress
countries.
asked coldly as she landed
We
about
can also
50
make
meters
use of
away
these
from
people
them.
to control Tianjin
The Empress's
Basin
current
and the
condition
Yun
wasn't
Nation
too
province.
good, Renbachin explained.
Many parts of her body were broken,
the Yun Nation
revealing
province,
blood-red wounds.
or the protectorate of the
You
East
actually
Cloud.
stopped. When the Yun
It
Nation
seems
is
like you
conquered,
value this
your
fellow
Majesty
quite a
can
lot.
call it whatever you want,
Ting Yu laughed
Renbachin
mischievously.
As for
It's
the
just
Yun
that
Nation,
I feel that if we
still
fight the
to the
Yun
death,
Nation now,
I won't be able
but
to
it wouldn't
leave with
be in
so
the
many of
future.
you here.
Neither
If
he
you
nor
heard
the
him,
Empress
even if
doubted
I
whether
have to go
Deo
to the
could
ends of
conquer
the
the Yun
earth,
Nation
I will
or
still
not.
kill you and dismember
Decades
you into
ago,
1,000 pieces.
if it wasn't for the fact that the former emperor didn't want to
Your
occupy
Majesty,
the Yun Nation
aren't you
and
telling
only
the other
wanted to
party
seize
that
it,
I'm a good
the
handle?
Yun Nation would have been destroyed.
Should I ask your Majesty to
Why
leave me
are they
alone
called the
and take
embroidered
revenge
uniform
for me,
guards?
or should I
The
ask your
Empress
Majesty
asked
not to be
curiously.
impulsive? In fact,
Hee.
their duties overlap
Ting Yu
with those
laughed
of the
mischievously
Department of
behind
Inspection.
Renbachin.
However,
Even
this
without
team
turning
is made
his
up
head,
of martial arts
Renbachin
experts
could
who
hear
have
the meaning
surrendered and is
behind these
different from the
words.
departments of the Imperial
Soon
Court.
after, he felt himself
Therefore,
being
they
thrown
have been
backward.
given another name. Following which,
At present,
he felt a
it's just a
sharp pain in his
concept.
body as a spear
If
nailed
your
into the
Majesty
wall.
doesn't like it, you can
After
call them
being
the
nailed
East
to the
Faction
wall by a
Guards,
spear,
the West Faction
Renbachin
Guards,
felt his
or
vision
the
turn
Department
black
of Security.
and almost fainted from the
Renbachin
pain.
explained simply.
Even though the spear
Embroidered
didn't pierce his
uniform
vital
guards,
points,
this
it
name
did
isn't
pierce
bad.
through the area below his
The
shoulder
Empress
blade.
nodded slightly and asked,
The waves
"Do you
of pain
think these people are
stimulated his
trustworthy?"
brain. Ting Yu stood 2 meters in front of Renbachin and said
Even though
calmly,
Renbachin had already
"Xixiao,
recruited
what are
these
you going to
people
do
and
now?
allowed them to participate in
What are
some
you going to
matters,
do now?"
the Empress still didn't
I
like
will
them.
definitely kill you.
Renbachin was
The
clear
Empress's
about this.
voice was filled with murderous
Even the
intent.
Empress was like this, let
Since
alone
you are going
the
to
others.
kill me anyway, it
However,
doesn't matter if
this
this
was
fellow
normal.
lives or dies.
After all,
Decades of
coincidentally,
attitudes
I
and
hate
likes
that
and
mouth of
dislikes
his,
couldn't be changed
so I might
in a
as
few
well tear
days
it
or
apart.
months. Ting
There
Yu
was still
laughed
a long
heartily.
way to go before these people
How
could
dare
truly
you?
live under the same sky
The Empress
as the
glared at him and
Aboriginals.
subconsciously took a step
It's an
forward.
attempt. Don't move.
As for whether they are trustworthy
Ting
or
Yu
not,
slapped the
we
shaft
can only
of the
find
spear
out
with the
after
back
we
of
use
his
them.
hand.
I'm
The
a little
spear
bored
was
and want to
immediately
go to
nailed
Earth
in
in
a
a few
relieve my
centimeters,
boredom,
and the pain
This
made
was the first
Renbachin's
time the
vision
Empress
turn
took
black.
the initiative to go to Earth.
Outside
Ting
of
Yu,
Tianjin
you are
Basin,
simply courting
she
death.
could still use the radio
She
station to
Wanya,
listen to news from
Qingping,
other directions.
and the others caught up and glared
Here,
at Ting Yu.
other than the daily letters
Why
from
don't
Goose
you slap
City,
yourself with
there
your
was nothing
palm
else
and
to
lower
do.
your strength by 30%.
It had been more than
then
a
we
month,
can fight again.
and her patience was wearing
With
thin.
so many of you around,
That's
I can
good.
feel at ease.
I reckon that those
Ting Yu
people will
looked at
take
the
at least
Empress
one
and
more
laughed.
day to return,
Renbachin
The Empress
said.
stared at him in silence.
Your Majesty, do you
Your
want to meet that
Majesty,
Su-Wen?
you mustn't.
The Empress's
She
eyes lit
Wanya
up when she
hurriedly
heard
shouted.
Renbachin's words.
All right. She was very
The
interested
Empress
in
raised
this person.
her palm.
One
Your
had to know
Majesty,
that his peaches were delivered after
everyone
the Empress
cried
was
out.
injured, and the
The
spirit
Empress
spear
stared
Ting Yu had
intently
also
at Ting Yu,
arrived.
as well as Renbachin,
Without these two
who was
peaches,
behind him.
with 30% of the
Attract
Empress's
his
strength
attention.
and the help of the other martial arts
Renbachin
experts,
mouthed.
they would at most be able
Even
to
though
drive
he
Ting
was
Yu
in
away.
so much pain that his vision
Both
turned
of them
black.
returned to
He
Earth
didn't
and
make
went to
any
their
sound.
respective rooms to change their
Your
clothes.
Majesty.
Everyone
Renbachin,
was still
who had
shouting.
just changed his underwear,
Noisy.
moved his ears and seemed to have
The
heard
Empress
something.
slapped her palm to the side,
Ah,
and a gust of air
help.
immediately sent She
The
Wanya
sound is
flying.
coming from outside the house.
Good.
And it's
Good.
getting closer and closer.
Not bad. You're
Renbachin
indeed loyal
thought
and
as he put on his
sentimental.
clothes and went to the window.
Ting Yu laughed loudly when he
However,
saw this.
before he could see the other party, he heard the
Just
sound
as
of
Ting Yu
glass
was
shattering
laughing,
next door
he suddenly
and a dull
felt
thud.
that something was amiss behind
Oh
him.
no. He swatted his palm
Renbachin
behind
quivered.
him, but unexpectedly,
The room next
he
door
missed.
was the Empress's.
He slammed into the wall
Renbachin
behind
pulled
him,
up his pants
smashing
and
it
hurriedly
into
ran
pieces.
to the room next door.
But he was gone.
He kicked
and
open
so
the
was his
door
gun.
and saw a palm getting bigger and
Wanya,
bigger.
Qingping,
Then,
Zhong
it slapped
Shen,
his
Lin
face.
Xiaola,
Thud.
Qingyun's sword and
Renbachin's
Zhuqing.
entire
Except
body
for
was
Ting
hanging
Yu,
from the
everyone
wall.
clearly saw Renbachin disappear from the wall with Ting Yu's gun. Chapter 500. Chapter 491. The Empress slapped Renbachin to the wall. When Renbachin returned to Earth, his
Then,
legs went
she
soft,
shyly put
and
down
he
her
fell to
arms
his
that were
knees.
covering her chest and changed
When
her
the spear
clothes.
hit the ground, he almost
Inside
fainted
the
from
room,
the pain.
the area
but he
near
didn't
the
dare
window
to
was
pull
a
it out.
mess.
If he
A
pulled it out
strange-looking
from
thing
such a
was
wound,
thrown onto the
he would
bed,
definitely
but only
lose a
half
lot
of it was
blood.
left. Furthermore, the other half was kicked far away from by the Empress the moment it crashed into the hemostasis ability of his. What was left behind was half of the strange-looking thing and a tightly wrapped girl who was about cremated by the time the ambulance arrived. She was bleeding profusely from her body and was lying on the bed. Supported his body and staggered to the second floor. If she didn't know that it was impossible to meet an assassin in this world, she would have been dead by now. Call the ambulance to my house. Even so,
if it's
the
any
broken
later,
pieces of
you
the
will lose
Empress's
your
kick
job.
left many wounds on the girl's body.
Renbochin's voice was a little weak,
Miss,
but it was still stable.
Miss. The most
At this
dangerous
moment
was
an
before
anxious
he
voice
came from outside the window.
After all,
it took
the
about
Empress
1
raised
second
her
for him to
eyebrows,
transmigrate,
kicked the girl,
and immediately
when the Empress
flew out of the
discovered
window.
that he had transmigrated,
A few
she
people
rushed
who were
over
rushing
from a few
over
meters
from afar
away to
watched
catch him.
helplessly as the girl crashed
He was really
through the window,
afraid that if Ting
flew
Yu
out,
found out and
and
brought
fell
him
on the
back,
lawn below,
he would really die a tragic
bastard.
death.
Fortunately,
The people below
Ting Yu
stared
was
with their
distracted
eyes
by the
wide
Empress
open.
at that time,
Even
and it was
though it was
already
wrong
too
for
late
the
by
young
the
mistress
time he
to
realized
lose control of her flying motorcycle
For a moment
and
just
crash
now,
into their house.
he really felt
It was
that he was
extremely
going to
cruel
die.
to throw her down from the second
After all,
floor.
the fourth most
There
powerful
weren't many
expert in
villas
the world was so despicable
and they were
that even the
worth tens of
Empress
millions
couldn't save
or
him
even
if he fell
hundreds
into
of
his
millions.
hands.
Those who could
Fortunately,
live here
he
were
was
all
careless
rich and
and used
powerful
the spear
people.
to pin him to the wall
A
to
few
provoke
people
the
ran
Empress.
over to check on the girl and
This
saw
gave
that her
him a
body was
chance.
full of injuries.
Otherwise,
Her
the
arm
grass
was
on his
also
grave
twisted
would be
at an
5
angle.
feet tall by this time
It was
next
broken
year.
when she was thrown down from the second
Renbochin leaned
floor.
against the bed and pressed
When
the
they
tip
saw
of the
this kind of
spear against
injury,
it.
their expressions
This
changed
way,
drastically.
the force of the spear's fall
One of
was
them
reduced,
hurriedly made a phone
and the pain
call.
from the wound
Another
was
ran
lessened.
to get the car, and another
Even though
stood
it was
below
better than
and
nothing,
scolded angrily.
it more or less made him feel
Who
better.
are you? After
Get down
feeling
here.
slightly better,
Are you
Renbochin
still human?
started to laugh.
How dare you
He
throw the
wasn't
young
dead,
mistress down
but that
from the second
bastard Ting Yu
floor?
was going to die.
You will regret it if you
The
don't
fourth
give any
most
leeway.
powerful expert in the world.
In the room, the Empress,
Renbochin
who
wondered
had just
what kind of
changed her
expression he would
clothes,
have when he
frowned and
realized
looked
that his
unhappy.
heaven-grade weapon, which
She
he had
crashed into the
painstakingly
room
built
while
his
she was
entire
changing her
life,
clothes.
had disappeared.
She was
It
already
would
being
definitely be a
magnanimous
sight
by
to
sparing her
behold.
life.
He really
Yet,
wanted to see
these
it with
people
his
were
own
still making
eyes.
noise below.
However,
If
if
this
this
was
was
her
wouldn't
world,
have the
her
chance
whole
to do
family
so.
would have been buried.
If a group of people
the
couldn't
Empress,
stop Ting Yu
sparing
without
the
his
other
spear,
party's life
then
was
he wouldn't
already
be the
the
fourth
greatest
most
kindness.
powerful expert in the world.
A few
but the
people
number
saw
one
a
expert
young
in
lady
the
in
world.
red appear in front of the window
As he let
and
his
said
imagination
coldly,
run
"Get
wild,
lost."
he watched as blood
Don't let me
flowed
see
along
you
the
again.
golden veins on the spear
Upon
and gradually
hearing the
formed
Empress's
a pool
words,
of blood.
a murderous aura
He still
surged
didn't
from the
hear
young
the
man's
sound of
body.
the ambulance.
Ignore her.
Renbochin began to
Go
feel
back
anxious.
and tell Sir that there will be a time
He called
when she
Shinfeng
regrets
again
it.
to confirm that she
The other
wasn't
person
far
checked
away
the girl's
and felt a little
body and
more
said
at
after
ease.
confirming that her life
The
was not
golden
in
patterns
danger.
on the spear looked as
The
if they
young
were
man
carved into
swallowed
the
his
spear.
words and stared fiercely
One
at
could
the
feel
Empress
the
on the
uneven
second
surface
floor.
of the spear with their hands,
The Empress was
which
a little
served as a
unhappy
blood
and
groove.
couldn't be bothered with the people below.
Although each of the lines was very shallow, there were many of them. She turned around to check on
following period of
Renbochin's
time was
injuries.
simply torturous.
Not long after,
Renbochin
they heard
felt
the
his
sound of a
strength
car
begin to
entering the
drain away.
courtyard and driving
His body
away.
became weaker and weaker.
During this time,
and his head began
they
to
also
feel
heard
dizzy.
words like, "Be
The
gentle,
iron chain
don't touch
emerged
the
from
young
the top
lady's
of his
wound.
head.
Be careful of the car
After
door."
twisting a few times,
The courtyard
it
of
wrapped
this
itself
villa
around
had
the
no
body of
walls.
the spear as if it wanted to pull the
Outside the
spear
villa
out.
was a large garden and
The
lawn,
metal chain
and
in
further out was a
Renbochin's
cement
body
road.
also sensed danger.
After a while,
If
Renbochin
Renbochin
woke up
died,
from his
it would
coma.
lose its place of existence
His
and
face and
vanish
nose
in a
hurt,
puff of smoke.
and there was a big bump on the
The
back of his
movement
head.
of the metal chain pulling the
His
spear
entire
jolted
body felt like
Renbochin
it was
out of his
falling
daze.
apart, and he hurriedly
When
stopped it.
Renbochin woke up,
The first
fortunately,
thing he saw
heard
was
the
the
sound of
in
an
the
ambulance
opposite
coming
room.
from afar and stopping in front of the
immediately
courtyard.
shocked.
Then,
Your Majesty,
they stopped outside the villa and knocked on the door a
hurriedly
few
shouted.
times.
"What are you shouting
Renbochin
for?"
could hear the sounds coming from
The Empress's
downstairs,
cold voice
but he
came
didn't
from
have the
beside
strength
him.
to get up and go to the window
Only
to
then
call
did
for them.
Renbochin realize that the Empress was
Fortunately,
leaning
a
against
moment
the
later,
wall and eating
someone
ice
opened
cream.
the door with a key.
What happened?
It was probably
Renbochin
Shinfeng who had
asked.
arrived at the same time as
His
the
mind
ambulance.
was spinning non-stop.
Following the trail of
Why
blood,
did he encounter
the group
an
hurried
attack
to the
when he
second
just came
floor
back?
and found Renbochin,
Logically
who had been
speaking,
pierced by a
it was
spear with
impossible
golden
for someone
lines.
to attack him.
Everyone was astonished.
Unless the matter between him and the nation was
Firstly,
discovered
they
by
were
foreign
astonished
countries.
by the spear.
Did foreign powers
Secondly,
send people
they
to
were
ambush
astonished
him?
by the clothes that Renbochin
This was the only
wearing.
possibility that Renbochin
After
could
all,
think of.
he was still wearing Dayo's
He was still in the
official
honeymoon
uniform.
period with the nation.
Boss, how are you feeling?
This time, he even brought back an
Shinfeng
arm,
didn't hide
a
the
leg,
astonishment
and
on her
some
face
internal
as she
organs of
hurriedly
Ting
ran
Yu.
over and asked.
It was impossible for
I'm
the
still
nation to do
alive.
anything to him.
It's hard to
He
say
didn't
if we
expect
don't
that
save
there
him
would be
now.
a day when he would be
Renbochin
targeted by
replied
enemy
weakly.
agents. The group of
But
people
who was
didn't
he?
dare to touch
latched the spear on Renbochen's body and hurriedly carried him sideways to the ambulance. He had the Empress by his side. However, the spear was nearly 2 meters long. Death.
and it was inevitable that it would bump into something.
The Empress said faintly.
This caused Renbotchen to grimace in pain.
Someone wrote something and crashed into the room from the window.
Couldn't even be washed away by the torrential river.
Renbotchen was
After getting
immediately
into the ambulance
with murderous
Renbotchen
intent.
finally relaxed.
Just now, the Empress was changing her clothes.
He saw some people standing in the distance
and was slapped to the wall.
They were presumably from
the other party
actually
attacked
at that time and even crashed into the room.
It was impossible for them to not know about such a big matter.
Where is he?
Since they knew,
they wouldn't let him die
his
so easily
and was full of murderous intent.
Compared to the hospital,
he's not dead.
Renbotchen had more faith in the strength of the
out of the window.
87
The Empress said faintly.
As the vehicle started moving, Renbotchen's vision turned black,
was shocked,
and he gradually fell asleep.
You said that you should try not to kill anyone here.
That spear is gone.
There are only ants here,
and I'm not
interested.
Had just fainted
the
when
Empress
chaos
said
broke
faintly.
out in the ambulance.
Just now,
that was
there
because
were people
the ancient
downstairs
spear
who
with
said
golden
that they would
veins
make me
had
regret
suddenly
it.
disappeared.
I want to see
the
how they will
make
me
me regret
pressing
it.
down on
Renbotchen's blood vessels
they
to
are
help him
simply
stop the
courting
bleeding
death.
was in a flurry. If they dare to appear
Finally,
again,
he
I will make
managed
them
to stop
regret
the
living in
bleeding.
this world.
When the ambulance arrived at the
was full
hospital,
of murderous
many
intent.
people rushed into the emergency
Not
room
only
to
did they
treat
dare to
Renbotchen,
attack the Empress, but they also dared to say such ruthless
In fact,
words. His problem wasn't difficult to deal with, and it was
Ruthless
easier
words.
to stop the bleeding.
If it was an attack
After
by
all,
enemy agents,
his ability to
they
stop
wouldn't be
bleeding
so
was much
retarded,
stronger
right?
than ordinary people.
Renbotchen rubbed
However,
his face,
Renbotchen's
nose,
problem
and
was
the
that he
back of his
couldn't get a
head.
blood transfusion. His blood type was very ordinary.
He stood up
but his
from the
body
ground
was
and went
extremely
into the room
resistant
to
to
take
other
a look.
people's blood. He discovered
It
that there
seems
were
that when
still
one
some
strength
objects
reaches
left
a certain
behind by the
level,
other party.
the body will change from the
What's
inside
this?
out, including the blood.
Renbotchen looked at it for a long time.
A few doctors who had never appeared in this
Half
hospital
of the object
before
was
looked at each
destroyed,
other,
and someone beside
the
them
front half
immediately
was
recorded
gone,
it down.
and only the back half,
When
a seat
Renbotchen woke
and a
up,
round plate
it was
were
already
left.
2 days later.
He couldn't see anything.
He was awakened by hunger in
He
his
carefully
stomach,
thought
and
about
it was
what
as
happened.
if his internal organs were
The
rebelling.
Empress was changing clothes
As
in the
mentioned
room,
before,
and the other
his
party
injuries
came in
weren't
through the
considered
window.
serious, and
Damn
Tinyu
it.
didn't pierce his vital organs.
It wouldn't be an exaggeration to tear
However,
them into
he
pieces.
had lost a lot of blood, and he couldn't
Renbotchen
receive
gritted
a
his
blood
teeth
transfusion
for a long time.
so he was relatively weak.
However,
he thought that he was on the
Boss,
second
I
floor
have good
now,
news and bad
the other
news.
party came in through the air.
Which one do you want to hear first?
This thing still had a seat and a
Shenfeng
round
was
plate.
sitting by the bed and playing
Was
with
it
her
a
phone.
flying motorcycle? Let's hear the bad
Your
news
Majesty,
first.
who came
Renbotchen
in?
said weakly.
Renbotchen asked.
He wondered if there was something wrong
It
with
should
his
be a
body.
woman who isn't even 20
You
years
have
old.
kidney
The
stones
Empress
and
said
liver
faintly.
stones. A woman
you want
who
them
isn't even
removed?
20 years old.
Shenfeng asked.
Renbotchen started to feel that something was
Renbotchen's
wrong.
face turned green when he
What
heard
are the
this.
people outside like? He had cultivated
What did
the
they say?
visualization of water.
Even though the
and
Empress was a little
visualization of
impatient,
wood,
she
and
still
they roughly
responded
explained
to the
it to
kidney
him.
and liver.
Renbotchen
He wouldn't
was
believe
speechless.
that there was nothing wrong with them.
He finally understood
He
that this
gritted his
wasn't an
teeth
attack,
and said,
but a
"I will
traffic
smash
accident.
the head of anyone who dares to
However,
remove my
this
stones."
traffic accident came directly to the
Boss,
second
are you
floor
really
of his
not
house,
going to reconsider?
and the Empress happened to be changing
stones
clothes.
can
cause urination difficulties
now,
and
the
kidney
Empress
dysfunction.
actually
kicked an unconscious
Shenfeng
girl out of the
asked.
second floor.
Renbotchen
thought
looked
about
at her
with a murderous gaze.
The Empress was
which made her
always right,
shiver,
and
there
she
was no
quickly
other
swallowed her
possibility.
words.
If there
What's the
was
good news?
then according to the previous rule,
Renbotchen
the
asked
Empress was
again.
always right.
Boss,
Knowing
you
that
are
the other
fine.
party wasn't an enemy
You
agent,
just need to rest for a
Renbotchen
period
didn't
of
know
time.
if he was relieved or disappointed.
This is good news, right?
Ever since he reached the
Shenfeng
manual level,
said with a
he didn't
smile.
even have a chance to show
With
his
such a
face.
smile on that neutral
As
and
for
cold
the other
face,
party's revenge,
he looked a little more
he could
like
just
a
leave
woman.
it to the Messier 87
Renbotchen
department.
heaved a sigh of relief
Even
when he
though
heard
there
this
were
and
rich
said to
people in this
Shenfeng,
area,
"Hurry
who
up
could be
and
more
get me
powerful
something to
than the
eat."
government. Enough for 10
Renbotchen
people.
put this matter aside and
20
recalled
minutes
the
later,
scene he saw before he
Renbotchen
passed
asked
out.
while drinking porridge,
Even
"Where's
though
the gun?"
Empress had used her arm
It
to block
disappeared.
it seemed like a little
It
bit was
disappeared
exposed.
not long after you were carried
He
to the
seemed to have
ambulance.
seen a smear of pink,
but he
Shenfeng
wasn't
was
sure if it was
surprised
an
when she
illusion.
mentioned this matter.
Renbotchen
Boss,
pondered and recalled
what's
that he
that?
couldn't miss such an important
You will
scene
know when
just
you have
because
the
he was
chance in the
unconscious.
future.
What
Renbotchen
disrespectful
waved his
thoughts are you
hand.
having? The Empress
However,
asked coldly.
he would
have to wait until a
How is
spirit
that
will
possible?
expert and a heaven-grade weapon appeared on
Renbotchen
Earth.
laughed. Since the
I'll
gun
give the
had
Messier
disappeared,
87
it should be
department
the
a call.
same as the metal chain.
Renbotchen walked
Tinyu
back
was
to his
probably
room,
dead
leaned
by
against the
now.
wall, and continued
After
to
drinking an
recall.
entire bucket of porridge,
Did he see it or
Renbotchen
not?
finally felt alive.
At that time, the Empress was
Although he
wearing
was
a pair
still
of
weak,
black lace
it was only a
panties.
matter of time before he recovered.
Renbotchen bought her underwear. She only had panties.
After
and
finishing
then there
his
were the
meal,
skin-tight shorts from that
Renbotchen
world,
closed his eyes
which were
and
similar
entered
to
the
safety
visualization
pants,
of fire.
the enchanting and elastic body
He
of
saw
the
a
Empress,
long spear
who was
covered red and golden veins,
was
and
half
a silver-white metal chain leaning against each other on a river of lava. It was as if they were living together, soaking their feet. The weather had been dry recently, and he was a little hot, and ignored
If you
him.
have any wild thoughts again,
the metal chain didn't care about him at all. The Empress's voice was transmitted to his ears through the wall, and pulled it back.
Renbochin laughed mischievously.
After a long time, it stuck it in again.
The Empress couldn't beat him to death.
But if she were to embarrass him, he was afraid that he would be
wasn't
beaten
too
up.
surprised.
Speaking of which,
He just felt
his
his
toothache
hadn't
looking at these
improved
two
in other
fellows,
aspects,
but his ability
the
to
iron
withstand
chain
beatings
and the
had
long
improved
spear
a lot.
had both settled down in his
If
sea
it
of
was before he
consciousness.
entered the manual level,
Would he have
would
to
have been
gather
sent to the
18
hospital
types of
again.
weapons in the future?
Renbochin
When he
gave
reached
Yang
the
Sun a
spirit
call and
level
told him
and
about
subdued
what had
them,
happened just
he would be
now.
able to show off the 18
Sir,
types
can
of
you stop
weapons in a
stirring
fight.
up trouble?
Even if he
Yang
couldn't
Sun
beat his
said
opponent,
helplessly,
he could still intimidate
I'll get
them
someone
with
to check
18
first.
heaven-grade weapons.
You should be content that he's still alive. Renbochin grinned.
Chapter 492.
Under those circumstances, the
Principal
Empress was
Ren,
already
Her
very
Majesty
lucky
is
that she
waiting
didn't
for
kill
you.
him. All
After
of a sudden,
hanging up the phone,
Renbochin returned to the streets out of the room and saw the Empress standing in front of his
glaring
messy
and
window.
scorching
sun made him unable
The
to
Empress
open his
raised her
eyes for a
eyebrows
moment
and
said, "They still
Then,
have people watching."
he heard
Gong Zhang's voice.
They really don't know what's good for them.
Renbochin squinted his eyes
She hadn't
and
noticed
began
before,
to size up his
but
surroundings.
now
realized that there were actually
The
people hiding
surroundings
in
were
the
in
shade of a
ruins,
tree in
and
the
the
distance.
original appearance of the street could
Your
no
Majesty,
longer be seen.
don't bother about them.
Dozens of winged
As
cavalry
Renbochin
warriors were
spoke,
standing there.
he looked at
and
the back
Captain
of the
Gong
Empress.
Zhang
was standing beside him.
His gaze moved from her
He
fine
didn't know
black
how
hair
long
to her
he had been
smooth
waiting,
shoulders,
and then
Ting Yu
continued
is dead.
downwards. Wherever
Renbochin's
Renbochin
gaze
turned his
stopped,
head and asked,
the Empress's skin would have
"I'll
small
leave the remaining
goosebumps,
head for
making her
Principal
feel
Ren.
itchy.
Have you
Gong
seen
Zhang
enough?"
grinned,
The Empress
revealing
turned
a
around and
mouthful
said
of
angrily,
white teeth.
"Your Majesty,
At that time,
do you want
his
to
gun
dance?"
was missing.
Renbochin
Wasn't that
asked on a
exciting?
whim. This was He what stepped forward, Renbochin was
held the
concerned
Empress's
about,
hand,
and pulled
This
her
was
downstairs.
the fourth most powerful expert
The
in the
Empress
world,
allowed him
and he
to
was
hold her
slightly
hand
stronger
and
than the
followed his
Empress.
footsteps. Renbochin
After a
really
while,
wanted to
the
see what kind of
classic
expression
cannon
he would
was
have
played
when
in
the
the living
heaven-grade
room.
weapon that he had painstakingly
Renbochin
created
put the
for
Empress's
decades
hands on his
disappeared.
shoulders and put his hands
Gong
on her
Zhang's
waist.
expression immediately
The
turned
warmth of their
strange.
bodies was transmitted through
One
their
had to
thin
know that
clothes to their
heaven-grade
palms.
weapons were condensed from spirits.
I really can't imagine how
They could
terrible
be
it would be
broken,
if I
but
didn't
they
meet your
couldn't be
Majesty.
snatched away. Renbochin
This was
gently
common
moved his
knowledge.
feet and looked straight into the
However,
Empress's eyes.
this understanding was shattered by
As
the
soon as
person
he
in front of
finished
him.
speaking, he was stepped
Under
on by
everyone's
the Empress.
watchful eyes,
Principal
It's
Ren
okay,
disappeared with
it
that
doesn't
gun.
hurt.
He would never
Renbochin
forget
ignored
Ting
the
Yu's
pain in his
expression and
toes
mournful
and
howl.
said with a face full of joy,
Even on the brink of
Fortunately,
death, Ting Yu
that
was
kind
still
of thing
trying to
will
summon
never
his
happen.
divine weapon. The Empress
After
looked at
listening to
Renbochin
Gong Zhang's
smile
account
and
of
felt
what
her
happened
heart
after he
beating
disappeared,
wildly. Renbochin
She
burst into
exerted more
laughter.
strength in her fingers
"You
and slowed
stabbed
down
me
her
with your
steps.
spear, and I stole your
Even
spear."
after such a long time,
No matter
she still
what,
felt a
he
little
finally
flustered
felt
every
that he
time
had
they
gotten
had
his
such
revenge.
intimate contact.
Under the protection
At
of
first,
many winged
this
cavalry
uncontrollable
warriors,
emotion made her want to
Renbochin
kill
truly
him,
witnessed
but
the
now she
destructive
began
power
to
of this
enjoy this
battle.
feeling.
It was
This
estimated
feeling
that at least
wasn't
1/10 of the
bad.
city had been turned into ruins. Broken walls and debris could be seen everywhere along
He
the
was
street.
stepped on again.
The stone slabs that were originally laid on the ground had also disappeared,
as he moved
and
his
large
toes.
pits could be
The
seen
two
everywhere.
of them felt each other's warmth in the
Looking
music.
into the distance, even part of the
Renbochin
city
moved
wall
his
had
face
collapsed.
forward and gently kissed the Empress's
Ting Yu
lips,
wanted to escape,
feeling the warmth
but
that seeped into
unfortunately,
his heart.
he did not succeed.
The Empress opened her eyes
If it was the
and
max
looked straight
level
at
of
him.
10, he had put
Her
10
eyes
points
were
into
filled
his
with
spear skill
tenderness.
points and 5 points
The
into
tips
his
of her
boxing
ears
skill
and cheeks
points.
began to warm up.
Without
Another
the
kick,
divine weapon,
Renbochin,
the final result
it doesn't
could be
hurt.
seen.
It really doesn't hurt.
As for the two
Amidst
bamboo
the music,
spears in
the two of them
City,
rotated gently.
ordinary weapons simply
Renbochin
couldn't withstand
withstood
the
the
strength of a
Empress's
spear and
ear
moved his
expert.
hands from the Empress's
What are the
waist to her back.
casualties?
The edge of
Renbochin
one palm
asked.
felt amazing elasticity,
This time,
while the other
we all
wrapped
hid
around
far
the
away,
Empress's back
so
and
it's
squeezed the
fine.
two of them together.
Where are the civilians?
His chest also felt a touch of
Renbochin
elasticity.
pointed around.
The Empress's hands
A
were
few
unknowingly
hundred.
wrapped around Renbochin's
They were all
neck.
affected by the aftermath.
Her face was full of
I
embarrassment.
saw that
they dug out a lot of them from the ruins. Gong Zhang scratched his head. He had not paid much attention to this matter. Chapter 501. Almost all of the largest mansions in the city were in that area,
drinking
but
ice
now
fruit
they were
juice
all
while
in
scratching
ruins.
his feet, or rather,
This time
rubbing
around,
his toes.
they occupied a large courtyard.
3 of his toes were visibly
The Empress
swollen like
occupied
3
the one
carrots,
with the best
but they were a
view.
little short.
The courtyard could only be
Renbochin was
described
looking
as
forward to
ordinary,
it,
but the original owner
Just
must
now,
have decorated
he
it
took advantage of the
meticulously.
passionate atmosphere
There
to
were
persuade
flowers everywhere in the courtyard, and they weren't neat like ordinary courtyards. He was looking forward to seeing the Empress's there were many kinds of flowers planted together. As the saying goes, the effect was very unique, is the best, and it had a unique sense of beauty. Is the most tempting.
In addition,
it's
the
like a
fragrance
cat
of these flowers gathered
itchy,
together to form a very pleasant
especially
smell.
for a person like the Empress.
As soon as Rinpoche walked
she was
into the
usually
courtyard,
ice cold,
he felt refreshed.
but today,
her eyes
Your
were
Majesty,
filled with affection.
I missed you so much.
Furthermore, she had changed into her swimsuit
when he
to
saw
show
the
off her
Empress.
figure. After going through another round of life to make him happy,
Rinpoche
felt especially
strength and power
amiable
were the
when he
best
saw the
packaging
Empress.
for a man.
The Empress rolled her
Sometimes,
eyes at
it was
him.
the same for a woman.
There are no more candies.
For women like the Empress and Li Yuanzhu,
Your
even
Majesty,
if they weren't exceptionally beautiful
died.
And only had ordinary
Can't
looks,
we be a little more
it was
gentle?
enough to make people's hearts flutter.
Rinpoche sighed.
If she had a peerless
If
elegance,
she was gentle,
then not
she
many men
would
would
be
be
able to resist such a temptation.
Your Majesty, how are your
if
injuries?
there was such a man, he would either be gay or a
walked to the
eunuch.
Empress's side,
sat
Rinpoche
down,
rubbed
and
his
asked
toes.
softly.
When he
Not
heard
a
the
big
door
deal.
open, he immediately
Will it
turned
take
his
another
head.
month this time?
First,
A pair of
Rinpoche
beautiful
asked
legs appeared in front of
subconsciously.
Rinpoche. When he saw the Empress
his
raise her
mind,
eyebrows,
the Empress in a
he knew
bikini
that he had
appeared,
guessed correctly,
and his heart began to beat faster.
The Empress just didn't want to make a
The weather
move.
was dry, and he had
If
to be
she
careful
did,
of internal
she would
heat.
definitely be
He drank
injured.
a mouthful of fruit juice
She
to
would
calm himself
definitely
down.
be injured.
However,
Thinking about the fifth
Rinpoche's
most
eyes
powerful
widened
person
very
in the
quickly
world.
when he saw the Empress
Now,
walking in with
she
a
was
white
the
bath
fourth
towel
most
wrapped
powerful
around
person
her.
in the world.
The white bath
It was
towel
such
was
a
just
sad
below her
story,
buttocks, revealing
Which
her fair
expert
legs,
in the novels and
smooth
movies
shoulders,
didn't have a sword
and
that
alluring
could kill 14
collarbones.
continents.
The weather was dry.
Then,
he would definitely
they would leave
be
with a
on
wave
fire.
of their sleeves,
Slurp,
and they would
slurp.
float away like an immortal.
Rinpoche drank half a glass
Each was
of
more
fruit
pretentious
juice
than
in
the
one
other,
breath and felt a little cooler.
For example,
the Empress
Xiaofeng
glanced
and
at
Rinpoche,
Rinpoche,
walked to his side,
who would be
and sat
seriously
down.
injured every time they made a
Your
move.
Majesty, aren't you going
In
to
any
test
case,
the water?
they would be seriously
Rinpoche
injured if they
passed
won and
another glass
seriously
of
injured
fruit
if they
juice to her.
lost.
Not
Oh,
interested,
they hadn't
the
lost
Empress
yet.
replied faintly.
However, they would
Her
still
face
be
had regained
seriously
its
injured
previous
every
coldness,
time.
but her voice was
Do you
much
have a problem
gentler.
with that?
That
The
layer of
Empress
coldness
saw
was like a
Rinpoche's
layer of
strange
shell.
expression and looked at him
Two
with a
people in an
murderous
indoor
look.
swimming pool.
She
Not
squinted
swimming
her
and not being
beautiful
able to
eyes.
bask in the sun.
Your
Seems
Majesty,
a little silly.
you are wise and
said after
virtuous.
some thought.
You will
Then,
unify the
he
world
felt
for
himself
thousands
flying,
of generations,
dancing in the air, and
Rinpoche
plunging into the water with a
exclaimed.
splash.
The Empress
That
then
way,
ignored him.
he wouldn't look so
Your
stupid.
Majesty, do you like this
The
courtyard?
Empress smirked.
I think the
The
garden
moment
outside is
Rinpoche
quite
entered
unique.
the water, he felt his strength,
Rinpoche
balance,
changed the
and
topic.
calmness disappear.
Not bad.
The fear of being surrounded
bit
by water
rustic.
resurfaced in his heart.
The Empress said faintly.
After tossing and turning in
The
the water
palace
for a long
happens to lack
time,
a gardener.
it finally stood up and
Why
spat
don't
out
we
a
get
stream
someone
of
to
water.
send him and his family to the
If
palace
he were
to
to
take
drown
care
in
of the
one.
garden for your Majesty?
That's exactly what I want.
The Empress
For me to
nodded.
pool, that would be too
Also,
depressing.
I saw a good carpenter
Rinpoche
previously
leaned
and
against
can get
the
someone
side
to
of the
send him
pool
back to the
and raised
palace.
his head to look at the Empress.
Tianjing Basin still
From
has
this
some
angle,
talents.
it was a pity that the Empress was crossing her legs and couldn't see anything. Rinpoche rolled his eyes, raised his hand, and a handful of water flew toward the Empress. Then, the water flew back and forth and hit Rinpoche's face. Seeing that the layer of ice on the Empress's face had melted, the smile on her face widened. Your Majesty, come down and give it a try. Soaking in the water for a while in this weather is simply too comfortable. Rinpoche said with a comfortable look on his face. When the Empress heard what Rinpoche said, her heart was moved. She got up from the reclining chair, leaped, and landed in the middle of the pool. She stretched out her hand and slapped it downwards. He swore that he saw a tsunami. It was as if there was a tsunami in the entire pool. All the water in the pool soared into the sky and hit the surrounding walls and ceiling. Countless water droplets splashed in all directions, and Rinpoche couldn't even open his eyes. He could hear the sound of water crashing against the walls. When Rinpoche opened his eyes, he was dumbstruck to see that the water in the pool had decreased by half. The Empress was wrapped in a bath towel, sitting in the pool and leaning against the wall. Soaking in the bath. He turned his head and looked around, only to see water everywhere outside the pool. The reclining chair was gone. The juice was gone. The table was gone. The speaker in the corner was probably damaged as well, Your Majesty. Rinpoche didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The Empress had a teasing look on her face. I know what you are thinking, but I won't let you see it. However, Rinpoche could finally dog paddle in the half-filled pool.
If he could still drown in this, he might as well drown. It was too embarrassing. He dog-paddled all the way to the Empress's side. As the water outside the pool fell back into the pool, the water level in the pool rose, and Renbochin had no choice but to stand up. However, the Empress actually maintained her previous sitting posture and floated in the water. If one looked closely, they would see that the Empress's fingers were constantly tapping downwards, which was why she was able to float in the water. "Your Majesty, you can't swim." Renbochin suddenly thought of a problem. Previously, he had seen the Empress jump from a cliff that was 100 meters high into the water before coming back up. As such, he had never thought that she couldn't swim. However, at this moment, he suddenly felt that this possibility was quite high. The Empress rolled her eyes at him and waved her hand in the water. Renbochin felt that he saw a tsunami again, washing him from one end of the pool to the other. "Well, I can't afford to offend you even if I can't swim." The two of them stayed in the pool for more than an hour before coming out. The Empress walked out with water dripping from her body. When she reached the door, the bath towel on her body fell off. Renbochin widened his eyes as he looked at the Empress's bare back and the outline of her bikini. Then, a door blocked the Empress's figure. "Is this a benefit?" Renbochin's heart was beating rapidly. "I'm having so much fun here that I don't miss home. Su-Wen and the like, to hell with it." It seemed like Her Majesty was in a good mood this time around. "Let's play for 2 more days." In a spacious office, an old man with white hair and beard sat on the sofa. "Boss, I found it." A young man wearing glasses walked to the old man's side and placed a stack of papers beside him. "The owner's name is Renbochin, and the lady's name is Qi Zixiao. Renbochin's parents are ordinary people who graduated from SY University. 3 years ago, he was very ordinary and was just an ordinary employee of a small company. Later on, he cooperated with a businessman with the surname Qin in S City. That 1,000 Gold Medical was established by them. Another thing to note is that he was once wanted together with Qi Zixiao. The reason for being wanted was because he killed a businessman with the surname Jean and his family of more than 10 people. After that, he and Qi Zixiao escaped from the country. Later on, it was unknown how they came back, but the wanted order was revoked. Combined with the phone call that you received previously, he must have hooked up with someone in the country. However, we haven't found out who this backer is. But from this point of view, the other party is a vicious and merciless person. Even though that businessman with the surname Jean had a background in the underworld, he was considered extremely daring in the current situation in the country. As for that Qi Zixiao, there's very little information. Other than the fact that he was once wanted, there's no other information. As the old man looked at the information in his hands and listened to the young man's narration, a cold glint flashed in his eyes. His granddaughter had already fainted after crashing into their house, and they actually threw her down from the 2nd floor. This was a huge feud. If he didn't take revenge, others would think that he was weak and easy to bully. Even though he didn't know how the other party got a ministerial official to call him, the other party didn't even show his face. Did they think that this would make him forget about this matter? So what if he had a backer? At his position, he didn't need to care so much anymore. Chapter 502. Boss, do you really want to do this? The young man wearing glasses bowed in front of the old man and asked. Go and arrange it. In business, we will naturally use business methods. Outside of business, we will use other methods. The old man said. Since the other party is vicious and merciless, we can't give him the chance to retaliate. Yes. I need an accident. Understood. The old man nodded slightly. Since the other party was vicious and merciless, then he couldn't blame him for being vicious. To be able to reach this position, who would be as clean as a white lotus? It was just that no matter what they did, they still played within the rules. However, there was no need for rules at this point. What? Is there a problem? When Renbochin returned to his room, he saw 5 or 6 missed calls from Yang Sen on his cell phone. He wondered if there were any twists and turns. It's fine if you don't make a move, but once you do, it'll be troublesome. Yang Sen sighed on the other end of the phone. Does he have a powerful background? Renbochin thought about it. Was there anyone with a more powerful background than him? Renbochin was now the ambassador connecting the two worlds and a man-will expert. He had a large group of earth-will experts under him. His background is not small. The other party's identity is not simple. The most important thing is the item in his hands. Yang Sen then told the other party's identity. Wang Ji. The top 100 richest people on the list. Renbochin was surprised. He had never heard of this name before. Although the other party's fame was not as eye-catching as internet giants like Uncle Ma and Uncle Ma, in fact, their influence was not low. Not only did he own the largest oil company in the country, but he also owned several oil and gas projects in the country. More importantly, he had something very important in his hands. 40% interest in a rock page company in America. A large oil field had just been discovered under the company's land, which was worth $900 billion according to the market price. Even if the entire oil field didn't belong to this company, they could still get a share of the profits. Although the news had not been announced, in this era where energy was the #1 resource, holding such a card in his hand was indeed not low. Not to mention the #1 privately run oil company, which could also explain some things. Therefore, even though Yang Sen had already called the other party through someone else, it was hard to say how effective it would be. In particular, Renbochin didn't say or do anything. He couldn't possibly tell him how important his identity was, could he? He could only talk about it from the side. Oh, got it, Renbochin replied indifferently. If you can apologize. Yang Sen said hesitantly. If Renbochin apologized and expressed his sincerity, this matter could be resolved. This is my house. If he barged into my house, do I have to treat him like a lord? Renbochin sneered. It's just a little girl, and the flying motorcycle has malfunctioned, Yang Sen said. Forget it. He firmly supported all of the Empress's actions. Everything that the Empress did was right. They are the ones who should be apologizing. They should really go and offer incense to thank Buddha for his protection. Yang Sen was frowning on the other end of the phone. That Wang Ji's identity was indeed not ordinary, but these two were not to be trifled with. To be honest, the Blessed Enclave was much more important than an oil field in the United States, or rather, the two could not be compared at all. At present, whether it was the secret manual, the long and short saber, the pair of swords made of unknown materials, or other things that the other party had taken out, they could all be said to be priceless treasures. The things contained in them were extremely valuable, whether it was the ability to control weapons with consciousness or new materials. Besides, there was no other possibility of obtaining these things from him. I will think of another way. Don't get into conflict with the other party and inform me if anything happens. Yang Sen thought that he had to communicate with the higher-ups. If that person appeared, he would definitely be able to suppress Wang Ji. As long as he doesn't provoke me, can't I drive the flying motorcycle and crash into his house? Renbochin grinned and hung up the phone. To be honest, he was really unlucky to encounter such a thing as soon as he came back. By the time Renbochin hung up the phone, the Empress had already changed into a red dress. Go out for a meal. Then go to the bund to see the scenery. Renbochin asked. Yes, I want to watch a movie, the Empress said. From her voice, one could tell that she was very interested. After coming to this world so many times, she had never gone to the cinema to watch a movie. She always saw such scenes on television, which made her curious. That's good. Renbochin felt that it wasn't a bad idea for the two of them to watch a movie and eat popcorn like an ordinary couple in the dark. After eating, Renbochin did some research and found that there was an interesting horror movie being screened. X-Men, New Mutants. Renbochin was also interested in making an X-Men movie into a horror movie. Renbochin and the Empress ate enough food for about 30 people. The Empress's chopsticks moved like a fan and couldn't be seen clearly. Renbochin could only see a series of afterimages. Although they were in a private room and didn't scare the other guests, the waiter was frightened. Renbochin had to admit that after his body became stronger, everything else was fine. However, his appetite was destined to make it impossible for him to eat in the restaurant's lobby. There weren't many people in the cinema. Renbochin and the Empress each carried a big bucket of popcorn and drinks into the cinema hall. "What are these?" the Empress asked as she looked at the glasses in her hand. "Put them on and see. You will know the specific effect in a while." Renbochin demonstrated how to put on the 3D glasses. Renbochin felt at ease when he smelled the fragrance from the Empress's body. He reached out and grabbed one of her hands. The two of them quietly waited for the movie to start. The movie had just started, and the leaves that floated out of the screen surprised the Empress. "It looks like it's in the air." The Empress stretched out her finger as if she wanted to touch it. It's a type of technology that uses the visual difference between the two eyes to produce a visual effect. It's like looking at a real object. Renbochin briefly introduced what he knew. Very interesting. The Empress was very interested in this. As the movie progressed, the plot of the movie began to attract the Empress's attention. The two of them didn't say anything else and quietly watched the movie while feeling the warmth from their hands that were holding each other's hands. The atmosphere of the movie was a little strange and was indeed filled with the atmosphere of a horror movie. Renbochin was really afraid that the Empress would be frightened by the sudden scenes in the movie and have an extreme reaction. Fortunately, this situation didn't happen. It wasn't until a character approached a rolling washing machine that a palm and flames suddenly shot out from inside. The Empress subconsciously flicked her finger at the moment the palm came over, rip. Along with a slight sound, a big hole appeared in the position of the palm on the screen, "Your Majesty." Renbochin didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he held the Empress's hand. There was a big hole in the screen, so the movie naturally couldn't be watched anymore. Even though the theater immediately arranged for other theaters, the two of them weren't interested. "Let's go back." The Empress was a little disappointed, but she couldn't say anything since she had ruined the movie. The two of them drove all the way back. When they passed a junction, an ear-piercing sound of tires could be heard. They saw a construction truck directly colliding with Renbochin's car. F***CK. Renbochin cursed. He stepped on the accelerator and felt the car shake violently. Then, the sky spun and the whole car was sent flying. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.